All right, folks, how you doing? So in this presentation, I've invited along Ricky D. Phillips to get his take on things because his hometown is London. He's a North Londoner, or Damascus, according to Commons Beaumont. So we'll see what he makes of all this. I did invite several people along to do these presentations, along with Jed, of course, but I'm leaving Jed alone at the moment because he's focusing on his own channel. And, I promised I would leave him be for a couple of months so he could just do his own thing. So been looking for other guests to get in on these presentations. And so far, Ricky is the only one who has given his word and kept it. So there you go. So I'll check back in when Ricky arrives.
You dressed up for the occasion then, huh?
Yeah, I got my best bathrobe on.
Brilliant. I've sort of got closed door with coats hanging on it, and you don't want to see what's around me.
Yeah.
I've got a beer. Am I right? A drink on your show?
Yeah, sure. Certainly, I've got my non-alcoholic beer here because then I might get too pissed. But here it is.
Bloody hell!
Video. I know.
The blur. There goes. Trying to get this kind of. Turn that off. Okay, that was me. That's that. There you go. That behind me. That's the original painting from the cover of Last Letters from Stanley. You probably can't see it there, but
I can kind of make it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the original painting that the guy did. It's still this is the writing desk. You wouldn't believe, look, the writing desk. That's the shit that's on it. This is where masterpieces are created somehow. I don't.
Well, I don't care how they're created. I don't care that they are created.
Yeah, it's no. If I wouldn't turn this laptop around. You'd be like, oh fuck. So don't wear glasses on the screen.
Well, just remember, was it from the first Spider-Man, the first Tobey Maguire? All geniuses are messy, something like that. One of the lines from Aunt May. He's a bit of a slob. All great men are, I think, is the line. So there you go.
It's actually true. It's but a friend of mine, historian Angus Constant, we used to go around to each other's houses and we had the same, have you got a book on? And, it's somewhere in my library, you'll have it, blah, blah, blah. And, he had this massive writing desk, 6-7 foot across, easy, huge, great big thing. And it was just covered and everything in he had an entire writing room and it was just, it was a DOS house, and it was still better than mine. But the amount of books we nicked off each other is untrue. I think I still owe him one, but he moved up to Orkney, so.
Well, Orkney does come up in this presentation, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So, first of all, do you want to introduce yourself? Who are you? And just go ahead.
So you press play, have you?
Yeah, it's recording. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so hi, I'm Ricky D. Phillips. I'm a historian, probably best known for my work on the 1982 Falklands War. What is a Falklands War historian doing here? Well, I do a lot more than just Falklands War. In fact, a lot of new history, a lot of crypto history, a lot of rewriting, very old bad history, a lot of debunking conspiracy theories and conspiracy facts. And much as we're talking about the ancient world here, of course, I also dabble a bit in ancient history. In fact, I'm the person who found Hannibal's first ever battlefield on the River Tagus in Spain from 220 BC, and of his father, Hamilcar, the Battle of the Soar from 238 BC. So I've got a bit of ancient history, and I'm a great friend of Blair, our host. So we're here to talk ancient history and crypto history and everything in between.
Well, what's your opinion of David Icke?
David Icke. Well, I've never met him, but oddly enough, of course, Mrs. Ricky knows David Icke. He's from the Isle of Wight, same as she is, and she's friends with one of his sons. She went to school with him. So, see, I was there when David Icke came out on TV and said, "I'm the son of God." So, and he was the snooker commentator before that. So, personally, I don't know. I think Ike's gone too far down a rabbit hole. But to be fair, he's probably got more money out of it and gained more popular traction than he ever did as the snooker commentator guy. So,
That's one way
maybe
to
maybe he's got something there after all.
sort of way to look at it. Yeah, I mean, I did a presentation on this channel called Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth, and I'm up to about 7.1 out of 8 parts, and most of that is based on his work.
I mean, he's certainly done his research. One of the things you find, I mean, people might say, what is that Falklands guy doing on this show? Because history is history, and no one said it had to be right. It's one of the things, of course, a lot of ancient history goes back to the Bible and things like that. And yet, obviously, the first, for me as a historian, the first proper history book is Herodotus. And Herodotus gets away with a lot of the stuff he writes with this wonderful line at the start. I don't know if you know it. I'm obliged to write what was told to me. I'm not obliged to believe it. Whereas
That's
the
a good
Bible,
line.
it's perfect. He got away with I could write anything, and whereas the
Yeah.
Bible says, believe this. And that's more open to interpretation than Herodotus in so many ways. And, you will find a lot of fallacies in both of them. Just Herodotus gave himself the perfect way out, But so when we start talking ancient histories and reinterpretations of ancient histories, a lot of this comes back to the Bible, which is ultimately a history book, which was absolutely manipulated.
Yep, definitely.
Nicaea, just I think he literally Constantine sort of put his hand on the desk, shoved half the books off, and said if God wanted them to be included, they'd still be on the desk. So, so it's that people reinterpret history that was absolutely known to have been dissected, pulled apart, willingly, unwillingly, by accident, and shoved back together. It's perhaps not uncommon, that someone would go, well, there might be something missing here, and that's I suppose that's where people like yourself, people like David Icke, people like many others come in. And of course, David Icke, you mentioned him. He's done several appearances on Chris Thrall's book, The T-Shirt Show, which of course was I think the first podcast I ever did. And
I think where people get put off with Ike is when he talks about the lizard people and all this and dragons and all dragon bloodline. People just get switched off. They're just like, oh God, But I have to be honest, I kind of give Ike credit in one way. He does have a very universal view. And he takes into account all cultures and all belief systems, and he does include them, and he does quote other authors quite a lot. I have found this through doing the Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth series. But with Beaumont, the author that we're focusing on here, he's far more, how could I say, bigoted is probably the best word, because Beaumont's opinion is nothing of any importance happened outside of Northern Europe. Like everything was in Europe.
Basically Britain.
Yeah, basically Britain and North Europe. And one of his lines was, the world owes less than nothing to its Asiatic peoples, which is a very strong statement.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, he's quoting from L.A. Waddell, Colonel Waddell, a Scottish colonel, who went on to discover the birthplace of the Buddha, and who was relying on Sanskrit texts and Hindu texts and Buddhist texts. So there was obvious hypocrisy there. He's quoting from a guy who did all his research in the East while saying nothing of value ever happened in the East. Right? There's a very open contradiction there.
But I think you get this when you're dealing with any history that people want to interpret a certain way or reinterpret. They do pick and choose. You can't have it all one way. And it's often, they find, oh, that bit's good. When I look at, say, conspiracy theories, when I say closer to home, say to my own more professional field, let's say the Falklands War. And we've spoken about this obviously off screen and what have you in our personal lives. I love debunking the 1982 May 30th HMS Invincible myth. For those who don't know this, of course, in the Falklands War, Argentina still maintains they sank our aircraft carrier HMS Invincible, and of course they didn't. They didn't attack it. They didn't come near it. They didn't hit it. But you found over 42 years, the conspiracy theories are still running and will run for 42 years more. And it's fascinating how even like the latest group of conspiracy theorists you could find here on YouTube will to pick a tiny bit out of a declassified report. This here, look, see, it proves everything. But their next post will be, see, look, here is a lie in this report. You can't believe anything in the reports whatsoever. And it's like, well, your last post was saying that this official report supposedly confirms everything, but now you can't believe them. So I think it comes down to bias, doesn't it? It comes out the
Of
enemy
course it does. All
of
the
all
time.
history is bias. And I think if you look at the,
Yeah.
I mean, William Comins Beaumont was one of the weird things I found about him is that and obviously was a respected journalist and what have you. He worked for the Daily Mail, as memory serves, and was quite a news bigwig. And then he suddenly pulls out this, and I think one of the weirder things is that maybe it's just because it wasn't, the age of the internet or what have you, or people had bigger and better things going on at the time. But he didn't gain a lot of traction at the time, but also he didn't come in for the kind of castigation you would have thought that he would have come in for. And he's got a bit of longevity, and he's actually getting more popular with age, of course, because people in the world today do look out there for answers. He's certainly a strange guy, but bigoted. You used a perfect word. I think that is the right word to describe him.
It's not an exaggeration to say that Comins Beaumont was an absolutely racist person. I mean, when you read into his works, some of the things he says are very inflammatory. But where I give Ike praise and credit is he makes the connections between like the Middle East and North Africa and Northern Europe, whereas Beaumont absolutely just dismisses them. Everything happened here, everything happened in Europe, and over there doesn't matter. Whereas Ike makes the connections and points out, yeah, it does actually matter because the connections exist and you can follow them up.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I will say about Comins Beaumont is that much as you hear about this person who is not, of course, very mainstream, and you look into one of his books, and weirdly enough, it sounds weird. He's compelling, isn't he? He's
he does. He'll hook you with something.
This guy's going to be a nutter. We'll just laugh every page, and you're like, he has done his homework.
He knows the Bible. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, I suppose we got to think of him as a man of his times and what have you. But he certainly knows his stuff, and a lot of people who do, be it revisionist history, crypto history, pseudo history, it all takes on a theme. New chronology is a thing. I mean, and I think people who do this have to be very well studied, and they can make a seamless job, and it would take someone immensely well studied to pull it apart. But the world is full of it. If you look at I would say pseudo history is what I would call utterly fake history. The guy didn't believe it anyway and tried to change it. We're talking things like David Irving and Holocaust denial and things like that. Irving knew because he faked the evidence, so he knew what the truth was, and he faked. That is pseudo history. He tried to put a new take on history and hoped people would believe it. Crypto history, very different. I think crypto history is more one of those. Look, we know what is set in stone history, but what about this? And you get this feeling that Comins Beaumont genuinely believes what he's saying.
Oh yeah, he absolutely believes it. You can tell.
And one of the weird things, of course, is that he's not trying to get other people to believe him. He's not trying to, much as he's sort of compelling and trying to say in the book that he's right. It's like he has no ambitions barring buy my book and open your mind. He's not trying to start a new religion, a new social cause, a new belief system, which is kind of weird. It's like you look and think, so what did he want? He sort of reminds me, I don't know, like if you go back to the start of like the the Protestant Reformation. You know, they say that Martin Luther wrote because he couldn't remain silent anymore, whereas Calvin sort of took that, and even though Calvinism was completely bonkers compared to Lutheranism, he created a socio-political economic system around it that people said, oh, that makes sense, so we'll be Calvinist. So he was more like Luther. He's just saying, look, I got to say this. He's not sort of like some of the other revisionist historians who say, and now here is the new great faith religion, what have you. You know, so there is a sort of a weird purity to his work, despite the, you know, of his time, what we'll call, you know, racism, bigotry, what have you.
Well, by today's standards, absolutely. But the thing is with Beaumont, he'll make a really good point and he'll get you thinking about it. And then you're like, wait a minute, where does he back this up? Where does he provide the evidence for this? And then you think about it, it's like, there's not really any solid evidence. You just kind of have to believe him. Whereas Ike has the kind of opposite problem. They're opposites in that regard.
Yeah.
Ike repeats himself over and over again. This was so frustrating when I was doing the presentations. Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth had to do so much editing because he'd repeat the same point over and over and over again. Like, you know, he's the kind of guy who would bore you to death down the pub talking 10 times about, you know, his dog won the competition last week. Did I tell you that my little Freddie won it? And I'm like, yes, you did 12 times already. But Beaumont is like the opposite. He doesn't really back up what he's saying. It's like you kind of have to A, follow his train of thought, and B, just believe him. You know, it's like, I'm a genius and I know this. And you're like, prove it. And he's like, no. Well, the proof is this and this. And he's kind of scatterbrained and all over the fucking place and it's impossible to follow. Like, what? You have to read it like 10 times. Like, huh?
He's very good at his topography, though. He can line up this area here, looks like this area here. And, you know, if you go back to a term I used earlier, new chronology, I mean, yeah, okay, it was Isaac Newton who started trying to treat the Bible as a history book and try to find places and dates and things that match up, try to make sense of this book. So, you know, we're in good company. You know, people say, you know, what the hell are these guys doing here? You know, a Scottish historian, a Falklands War historian, talking about this. Well, you know, Isaac Newton started certainly in the UK. But to give you an idea, and I'm sure you know this anyway, but certainly for people watching, if you look at what we would call new chronology, you know, they identified sort of 4 periods of man from sort of 1600 BC to 1600 AD, which repeat and repeat and repeat with, weirdly enough, mathematical precision.
Oh, you're frozen.
Sorry.
That's okay.
We back?
Yeah, I think so.
It goes into weird things like Jesus Christ was in fact Pope Gregory VII, and that one of the 3 kings or wise men was in fact Princess Olga, who then converted to Russian Orthodoxy and things like that, and how the Holy Roman Empire is more involved in it. If this sounds weird, Vladimir Putin, more or less kind of early 2000s, he's been in a long time, had this put on the curriculum in Russia. New chronology is taught as fact in Russia today. Much good at doing them. But and you can go back to, you know, Nazism and the ideas of the Teutonic Knights. You can look at, we've said about Luther and Calvin, but again, you can look at the Book of Mormon. You can look at Rastafarianism. You can look at Afrocentric history, new feminist history, Zionist history, you know, all this, everything. A lot of these systems rely upon rebuilding, reinterpreting history, throw away the bits you don't like, put in this, and yes, you must believe me. So, you know, it is a fascinating study because it's what people believe. It's what people have fought and died for, less and more than this. I don't think anyone's going to die for William Coleman's Beaumont or David Icke, hopefully, but
Well,
you
you never
never.
know. Every cult has their martyrs, as it were. But I will say this about that: I lived in Russia about 8 or 9 years ago, and I have also lived in Kazakhstan as well, which is right next to Russia. I've never met a Russian who liked Putin,
No,
not one. And
I
they're all talking about this war that's going to happen between Britain and Russia, and I'm like, for fuck's sake, really? We're going to go down this road?
do you know? I'm going to be honest. Putin put the 3-day special military operation, and when
Mhm.
it happened, I said to Mrs. Ricky, I said that this will all be over in 3 or 4 days, and and I'm supposed to be well studied on this, and
Mm.
on paper I'd have been right, but but here's an interesting thing when we look at, say, these 4 ages of man or what have you.
Mhm.
Let's imagine there's no internet. Let's imagine we have just scripts to write on, or the apocryphal global thermonuclear war happens and we lose so much. If in 1,000 years someone came back and said, hang on a sec, well, there's this Napoleon guy and this
Mhm.
Bismarck guy and this Hindenburg guy and this Hitler guy and this Putin guy, they could all be the same guy, couldn't they? And
They are, in a way, they are. Do you
yeah, and
remember?
actually,
Yeah.
if you look at it, if you ignore the detail, because of
Mhm.
course, if you do ancient history, you don't have a lot of detail at all. You have to fill in the blanks. You have to go with your gut, which leaves ancient history so open to interpretation.
Yep.
But if you put in just the base elements of all of them, and this is not, 4 huge chunks of mankind over the course of 3,200 years. This is, five or six incidents in what, 150 years.
Yeah.
How would you know which is which? So it's easy to see how people come into this. It's just what Coleman's Bowman takes it to
Yeah.
takes it to
Well, he
11,
does.
doesn't it?
Well, I will say this though: if Beaumont is right in his interpretation of history, and this is a big if, admittedly, but if he is right, then like the Persian invasion of Greece was really a Russian invasion of the north of Europe. So the Russians have been trying to conquer Europe and the West for thousands of years. If Beaumont is right, and that is a big if. Having said all that, so is it the Russian ambition to conquer Europe? Well, it is certainly the ambition of certain Russians. I will say that. Is it the ambition of the Russian people themselves? Well, probably not. But
But again, it comes down
there's a
to
big
the
if.
yeah, but it still comes
Yeah,
back to that new
yeah,
chronology which is being
yeah.
taught in Russia. Like the
Hmm.
Germans and going on into the Nazis taught the hegemony of the Teutonic Knights and things like that. So this it weirdly enough, it's current. It's now. There are people
Hmm.
who somehow believe that and are doing something today in the modern world. Don't get me wrong, I don't think anyone on the front line right now between sort of Russia and Ukraine is sitting there thinking about, was Princess Olga anything to do with this? But certainly new chronology it is a massive thing. And I think, people, the internet has also given people a great way to explore new ideas. People are looking for answers. And, we live in a world where so many of us have learned that the answer you're told isn't isn't the answer you got. It was only a few
Yeah,
years ago. We were watching people in like full white suits with the masks in China suddenly go, oh, keel over.
mm,
This is COVID. Oh my God, they're dropping down like flies. That was a put up job. I said at the time, that's a blatant put up job. Who was filming that guy?
mm,
But everyone still went, everyone knew it was crap. Everyone knew it was a put up job, but we still went along with it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not a pro or anti anything. Do I think it was a put up job? Yes, it was. Was COVID an illness? Yes, I had it twice.
mm.
I was fortunate. 100% of colds I've ever had were worse than either time that I got COVID. But then I met someone uh, 2 days ago whose dad died of COVID. So it got
Yep.
everyone in different ways. But
I've known. Yep, I've known people who died of COVID. Yep.
yeah, And it was, but what the story is behind COVID, we won't live to know. Someone may know, someone may not. But when you look at the stories that we're told and the stories that we're given, people know their lies, and so people do go to, be it a David Icke, be it a Comer's Bowman, be it
Yeah.
a certain crypto history, pseudo history, flat Earth. Flat Earth is on the rise, despite the idea that
It is.
it is. I mean,
Really?
despite the rather obvious points,
Yeah.
you try and argue with a convinced flat earther, you'll get no sense. You'll get absolutely no sense. They are utterly, utterly convinced. And it's on the rise because people are looking for answers. Because
Yeah.
I'll be honest, because the answers they're getting are rubbish, and because the internet provides so many more outlets which we didn't have before.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what do you think of the hollow Earth idea? Do you think that's as ridiculous as flat Earth, or do you think there's more nuance to it? Because I do plan on covering hollow Earth quite a lot in the future. I've got loads of books on it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not studied on it. I mean, as a qualified engineer, first, I would say no, it can't happen.
Okay.
There's, I just don't see how it would happen, if you see what I mean. But I don't know enough about it. I would still, I'll be honest, bias. First lesson in history, bias is the enemy of history. And so you have to, as a historian, I think, you're sort of, you've already signed up to the idea that if you're saying something without evidence, then that's bias, that's opinion. And one of the things you're not allowed, of course, as an author, particularly a published author, is your own opinion. We're not
Sure.
allowed opinions. We have to have facts and go with them.
Yeah.
And I'm not learned enough about it, as I hope a sort of a realist and as an engineer and what have you, I would say it's not possible.
Hmm.
But if someone came and said, "Look, there's this," I would review the evidence and say, "Okay,
Sure.
that would sell me ABC." I'd still be fighting my own bias the entire way because I don't feel that it would be possible
Yeah.
without certain other things being
Well,
in effect. But who knows?
I will say one thing though that makes me hope that hollow Earth is real, and things I've read from the books I've got over there, is that the folk who live within the planet, if that is true, they will not allow World War III to happen. They will not ever let a nuclear war happen, because that would affect them as well.
Yeah,
So that makes me cross my fingers and think, God, I hope it's fucking true. Because apparently there were recorded situations where the missiles have been in the silos and they were getting ready to go, and they just like shut down inexplicably. They wouldn't work
yeah.
for some reason or really no reason. They were scratching their heads. Engineers are wondering what the hell? Why did it shut down? Because the folk who were within the planet stopped it. They said, nope, not fucking happening. If you destroy the surface, it's going to affect us. We're not going to let it happen.
Oh, it's a lovely idea, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
unfortunately,
exactly. Yeah,
we are
yeah,
that stupid. I mean, I
yeah.
have been laughing this week because there was mildly inflamed, massively inflamed comment from the commander of the British Army. Said, that Ukraine shows, the example of Ukraine shows that a motivated civilian army can win wars. And
No, it's the Russian ground and pound. They're going to win. Russia's going to win in the Ukraine. You can take that to the bank.
I'm gonna say honestly, not, because they cannot achieve what there was Norman Schwarzkopf, or Stormen Norman,
Yeah,
referred to, what we used to call strategic goals and things, a desired end state he came up with. The Russians can't achieve it, and not without that, not without doing something stupid like dropping an atom bomb on Kiev or something like that, and forcing everyone to go, whoa, 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 hang on a sec. You know,
Mhm.
if I was, if I was a gambling man, I would say that the best you're gonna do is say, right, you go your side of the line, we'll stay ours, and you keep Crimea. because I don't think he'll let go of Crimea, which I think is what a lot of it was about, and I think that could be the gambit. But the thing is, Russia can't win if they go all the way to the end of Ukraine. What do? You got Poland next, and I there's no point letting him off the hook.
Yeah.
But he's sort of, I know Ukraine said, well, give us more, and we should. I'm massively pro-Ukraine in this, but I also feel that Putin's been deliberately allowed into this area where he's just slowly bleeding to death. He's not.
Yeah. Well,
He's not
it's like
overrun. He's just slowly bleeding his own country into ruin. And
he is. Well, that's true. Also, I don't disagree. But what I will say is, Stalin during World War II was very suspicious of the West, like Churchill and Roosevelt. He said the West is trying to win this war down to the last Russian. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Ukraine, is sending all the munitions and all the arms to Ukraine, is just trying to bleed Russia down to the last man, basically.
I mean, yes, no, I mean, my great uncle Jim got torpedoed twice on the Antarctic convoys to Arkhangelsk, where he was delivering, be it munitions and tanks and aircraft and other things to the Soviet Union, to Russia. He got torpedoed twice in the war, which that's a death sentence. No one's going to stop for you out there. And twice he managed to sort of grab a net or something passing by and get himself up to safety. In fact, I've got to be honest, I'm just completely off subject. My great uncle Jim managed to get torpedoed, as I said, twice in the Arctic and survive. He was then on HMS Janus in 1944 off of the Anzio beachhead and got hit by a Fritz X guided bomb, which broke the ship in half and killed 2/3 of the crew. Jim got off of it. He then joined the Merchant Navy, and he was traveling to, I believe, I could be wrong, but I want to say Bristol, and he got ill and he had to stop, and he's been sick and what have you. By the time he got there, the ship had sailed without him. The ship vanished, I believe, in the Bermuda Triangle. In fact, it vanished with all hands.
Of all damn places.
I'm not sure if the man was lucky or if he was a fucking curse, because my great uncle Jim, it's a bit like Uncle Albert, isn't it?
Yeah, I was about to say, put Uncle Albert to shame.
Yeah, I mean, and probably linking it more back up with your channel. Sadly, the poor old sod died fighting aliens naked in his loft with an axe, and fell out the loft hatch straight down the stairs, and whack, that was the end of him.
Fighting aliens. What was he hallucinating?
Yeah, he had some, be it post-traumatic stress disorder or what have you, which is understandable, but he lived a few days after hitting the bottom, and claimed he was fighting aliens, which was why he was naked with an axe.
I'm really trying not to laugh, but it is kind of comical. I'm sorry.
But no, I mean, I only saw Jim once in my life, but I think it was about 1988 he died, something like that. But the man was a bloody curse. I wanted to get on shit,
Him and Uncle Albert can swap stories in heaven, I'll tell you.
You probably find, he was on the Hood, the Bismarck, a few others to boot or something like that. He swapped sides and went on the Yamato as well or something. But he, so. But my point being that he helped keep Russians in the war, and but no, I don't know. I mean, I don't see a way that Russia can win that war. But Russia, coming back to them, is behind a lot of this. Things that Coleman's Beaumont wrote, things that other people have done, Newton's work, etc. The Russians, it is a Russian, new chronology is a Russian thing. It's if you think of the chess master Garry Kasparov, he is a huge exponent of new chronology, and you sit there and think, well, this is an educated guy. What the hell is he doing? He's massive behind it. He's like Tom Cruise and Scientology, and you've got Garry Kasparov and new chronology. It's it's a, I don't know, it's a crypto history, it's a pseudo belief system, but he's he's massively behind it. So are many other people whose names I can't remember or pronounce because they're Russian. But Coleman's Beaumont, I mean, he said so. London was
Damascus.
Damascus.
And David Icke said that London was New Troy, Nova Troia.
London was
So London either way was pretty damn important, though in what particular way depends on who you want to believe.
I think, well, of course, I mean, Troy links a little bit with Britain because, of course, we're supposedly named after Brutus, Prince of Troy.
Yep. Who's, I
Uh,
think, the grandson of Aeneas, if I'm not mistaken. Or
that's
son of his
correct.
grandson.
Yeah. Yeah. And I should know because it's in the book I wrote, isn't it? But, which you've got.
Yeah.
But it was quite a few years ago. But no, I mean, Troy, we know where Troy is. Alexander the Great knew where Troy was. The ruins of ancient Troy are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You know, they're pretty well marked out. But yeah, I mean, to say that everything there is everything here, I mean, he is close, but it's a bit like saying Edinburgh is actually Rome because they're both built on 7 hills, isn't it?
Well, actually, Edinburgh was Jerusalem, according to Beaumont.
Yeah. And I know he said like none of the landscape matches up or anything else like that. This person described this, and in fact it was that. I mean, it is clever. It is clever. I'm not saying I believe him at all, but it is.
Oh, that's all right. I know.
it is clever how he's. But I think what's when you produce a seamless job of history, I will excuse my dog's probably barking in the background. Right. But,
it's okay.
Ironically enough, actually, dogs barking leads you onto something. I always find when people say, "Look, there's no evidence of ABC," that I've found, in fact, in history, particularly looking at be it conspiracy theories, looking at conspiracy facts, something that isn't a theory, something that is written as set in stone history that isn't true, and you look at the evidence, which we do as historians, I found that there's 3 reasons that evidence doesn't exist. You've got 1, there is no evidence. Someone made it up. It's wishful thinking. It's what have you. There's no evidence. That is the truth. Then you've got nobody looked for the evidence. Nobody ever bothered. When I wrote, but I'm, quite famous for writing First Casualty. Nobody had even been and looked at the official report and said, actually, this says something different in all these years. So, nobody had ever bothered to question the history. That can be true. And asking questions of history, which is what you do, what the people whose works you review have done, that's okay. That is okay. You feel free to ask a question. I remember speaking to a very senior Falklands War veteran. I said, why didn't you ask that question in your book? And he said, because I didn't know the answer. I thought to myself, well,
that's why you should ask.
Yes, that. And he said, well, you can't write a question and not know the answer. I said, yes, you can. So look, this begs a question. There is a question here. I can't answer it, but someone might one day pose the question. He said, oh, no, I didn't like to do that. So, you've got no evidence because there's no evidence. You've got no evidence because no one looked. And coming back to the dogs barking, something I've used in history, which I wish more people would use, is the dog that didn't bark. We probably know. I don't know if you might remember from your youth and mine. I'm only a few years older than you. A book called the Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. Do you remember that?
No idea what that. No, unfortunately not.
It's a massive book. Okay, the book is about an autistic child and what have you, and how they see the world. It was a massive, huge, best-selling book. But the name comes from a Sherlock Holmes mystery, which is the case of Silver Blaze. Silver Blaze being a award-winning racehorse that is stolen, and at the night where it's stolen, it is surrounded at various points by guard dogs. And yet Silver Blaze vanishes next morning. No one heard the dogs barking, etc. so there's no evidence. What the hell happened? And this is when no evidence is evidence or can be evidence, because it turns out that they say I think Holmes says the curious incident of the dog in the night time, and Watson says, "You mean the dog that didn't bark?" And he said that was the curious incident. The case is solved because it turns out that the person who stole the horse knew the dog. That's why the dog didn't bark.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so sometimes I call it the dog that didn't bark. No evidence is evidence of itself. It's like a black hole. You can't see a black hole. No one's ever seen a black hole because there's nothing to see. But you see how everything behaves around it, and then you go, there has to be something there. Something is missing. We call that a black hole. So you can define history by what you don't know and by no evidence. So you have to, just because there's no evidence of that, don't stop looking. Never stop looking, because sometimes, history isn't just, oh, this happened here. It ripples out, but you would see things happening around it, and that is generally how you get your best impression of history, is the ripple effect of what's happening around it. In this respect, of course, Comins-Beaumont falls down a bit flat, doesn't he? This was here and off we go.
As it were. Yeah, it's just with Beaumont, it's almost like, I don't want to say a cult, that's not quite right, but like you almost have to believe him or just don't believe him. It's very black and white, whereas Ike, I think, does a far superior job of actually supporting what he says, because he does quote other authors a lot.
Now,
in his
I know
books.
You'd love to have David Icke on your show, wouldn't you?
Of course I would, yeah. And The Biggest Secret and Children of the Matrix, those are my two favourite books of his. But he does actually somewhat back up what he's saying. Whereas with Beaumont, it doesn't really happen. Not nearly to the same extent.
I mean, I know it's one of the things that you look at these people, and you're not saying you believe exactly this, or you out there must believe exactly that. You're reviewing these people.
I do have my criticisms of Ike as well, however. I don't 100% believe him. I believe him more than I believe Beaumont in certain areas, but I don't 100% just blindly believe David Icke either, I have to say.
I think the problem is, it's a question. There is, we've spoken about bias and bigotry and what have you. I'm going to say, and I don't want to be rude to the man or anything, but there is a point of sanity or not with Ike and some others. I think you're entitled to question where the hell that came from. I mean,
well, like I say, when he starts talking about the lizard people, a lot of people just check out, just like, what the fucking hell? Talking about lizard people?
Does he still think he's the son of God, or has he toned that one down a bit?
Well, and what he says about the royal, I think another thing that pisses people off is very critical of the royal family. I think that turns a lot of people off, to be honest, because a lot of British people take tremendous pride in the royal family. Maybe not so much this side of the border, but so in Glasgow, a lot of people do. A lot of people are pro royal family, like a lot of Rangers fans.
Yeah, I was going to say
I'm a Rangers fan,
but it's yeah. I mean, I think I came out of sort of the royal family, shape shifting lizard people, or something. I mean,
I don't want to get into that here. I edited all that out in the presentations. There's a lot of things, by the way, Mars Atlantis and the Hollow Earth, that I didn't put in. I just stuck to things which are basically factual and close to factual, and you can look them up. But there's a lot as well that I left out. Because that's the thing with Ike. He really does go off the rails a bit. Listen, I'm going to have to nip to the loo, so I'm going to put you on the screen so you got a few minutes to just talk about whatever you want, and I'll come back.
I was going to say, why don't you press pause, because I'm going to grab another beer.
Okay, I'll just hit the pause button. We'll both come back in a few minutes. How's that?
All right, cool.
All right, cheers.
We're back.
Right, I'm back. Yeah, what was I going to say about Ike? Ike, I think, if I remember correctly, I think he came from like a working class family from Leicester. So he's not going to be very pro-monarchy to begin with. But like I say, I did kind of edit, and in some cases kind of heavily edit out a lot of the things that I saw in The Biggest Secret and Children of the Matrix. Not because I wanted to disparage Ike in any way, but I wanted to just keep it very, very simple and straightforward. This is the point, and this is what he's getting at, kind of thing, and cutting away a lot of the fat on the sides, as it were.
Yeah, I think an interesting. I mean, I don't follow Ike and his work and what have you, but you use an interesting word then when you say Matrix. I remember when the Matrix came out. You remember this?
Yeah.
I saw it at the
Yeah.
cinema the first day it came out, and I think everyone walked out of that film eyes wide, sort of staring about, because it did make you think of things. And you can look on YouTube and find clips of what they call glitches in the Matrix and things like that. And there's a lot of people, again, when we talk about crypto history, as opposed to pseudo history, as opposed to, well, it's just a silly idea, and if people believe it, there you go. But crypto history, I mean, there are scientists. There is I believe I read, I don't know, a couple of months ago, that scientists, it's always scientists have proved, isn't it? But that scientists have proved, supposedly, that we are characters in a simulation. There you go. That we are indeed in the Matrix, and none of this is going on. Now, did this come from a film? Was this, don't get me wrong, it was a powerful film. I mean, at the same thing, I remember watching Fast and Furious the day it came out, and everyone coming out the Hollywood Bowl in Finchley, turbos zinging and baked bean tits. So
fucking boy racers went mental.
Of course, I had a Sapphire Cosworth, and all my mates had like 200 SX turbos and stuff like that. We were zinging it around, but so was everybody else. I mean, there was like about 30 wrecked cars from like 100 yards outside, because we've seen Fast and Furious, and so there is an influence.
Oh, hang on, it's frozen again.
Out. So the whole time Fast and Furious was out and trending, we, everyone was driving like a complete nut.
Before they made 10 bloody sequels to the damn thing.
I don't get it. I gave up. Realistically, 3 got bad, and then I just the first one was great. How the hell do you get from nicking knocked off DVD players from trucks, just doable, to attack helicopters and nuclear submarines? It gets ridiculous.
I don't know. I gave up after number 7. I think I haven't seen anybody on 7.
I can't even remember where I am. I can't. My sort of my love for Michelle Rodriguez kind of waned a little bit. It wasn't enough to carry me through, so I gave up in the end. But now it's just like the Rock and shit. I don't get it. But no, what I'm saying is, I don't know Ike's book Children of the Matrix, but that the Matrix provides, if people are trying to work out, what we're talking about, or what Comus Beaumont was talking about, the Matrix provides another clear example of crypto history. When we have leading scientists, and then people say, who? And I go, I don't know. It's not a very educated comment as such. But when you have scientists, paid scientists in universities doing tests because of this, and telling whoever that it doesn't matter actually what you do, because you're in a video simulation and you're being, the machine took over already.
I'm going to get into all this in my own channel in the future with books like Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight. What a name. What a title for a book, by the way. Who Built the Moon? Very evocative, isn't it? It gets you thinking, kind of thing. And it's a catchy title. And get into the whole thing with the Hollow Earth and the Moon and Atlantis and Mars and all this. And I'm going to go fully off the rails, I'll just be honest, with all this stuff in the future. And it might put a lot of people off, or it might intrigue a lot of people. You're never going to please everybody anyway, but I'm going to get into all of it.
But then I would say, weirdly enough, you might not believe this, but Napoleon, who there's a statue of him somewhere. Yeah, you might just see him over my shoulder here. Napoleon, who is something of an icon to me, is the second most written about subject in the world. And if I said, what's number 1? Do you know it's Atlantis? The theory, look at your eyes. The theory of Atlantis is the most written about subject on Earth. People go, no, it's got to be Jesus or something. No, Jesus is well down. Jesus is like 3, 4 in the rankings. Atlantis. And you sit and go, But I don't know any books on Atlantis, for God's sake. I don't know any. I've never read one. I've probably seen one somewhere, but but Atlantis, or the theory of Atlantis, is the most
Mhm.
written about subject in the world, certainly at least in the Western world. And so you're not that far, that far. People go, well, it's a very weird thing to
Yeah.
be doing. Actually, it's probably right or wrong. It's probably more profitable than what I do for a living.
Well,
Uh,
that's the case, that I haven't gotten fully into that, But yeah, I mean, I haven't really got into Atlantis because the Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth is covering all three. I haven't gone specifically into Atlantis an awful lot yet, but it is something I certainly plan on covering. That is for sure.
you
And
do get
according to Beaumont, Britain was actually part of Atlantis, and so was Ireland.
there is a, I can't remember for the life of me now, but there is this. I think there was sort of Britain and Ireland, and there was this extra island that was there.
Doggerland,
Vikings wrote. Sorry,
Doggerland. It's called
no,
Doggerland.
no. Doggerland is off to the east. This was sort of
Oh, okay.
south and west. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. And even but then I think the Vikings wrote of it, but then the Vikings wrote of Thule. It looks like Thule,
Yeah,
Thule.
I've covered
Um,
that. Yeah,
which
the Nazis were obsessed with it.
yes, Hitler was. I was going
Yeah,
to say that Hitler.
Ultima Thule. Yeah.
But then the weird thing is, if you look at southern Thule, it looks like southern Thule. Thule sounds ridiculous, but if you look at
Mhm.
that, which is in the South Sandwich Islands, which is part of the Antarctic, part of what you call British Antarctica. It's Falkland Islands, again, the dependent territory. That you will find a conspiracy theory about that. The black goo conspiracy theory, the sentient
Mm.
black goo that
Yep.
supposedly killed a load of scientists at Marconi and things like that. And you sit there and go, no. But I mean, it's tough. Look, I know the guys who were in Operation Keyhole and went and took the Corvette Uruguay base that the Argentines had set up on southern Chile, and they can tell you that all they came back with was several thousand tins of Argentine corned beef that were feeding them for years. But
Mm.
then you will find Falklands veteran from HMS Yarmouth, a man called Paul Cardin. Paul, you'd probably get on like a house on fire with Paul. Paul and I
Yeah.
have differences. He's a David Icke fanatic.
Okay.
But he's absolutely. He wrote a book, in fact, I think last year, called The
Yeah.
Fulton's Deception. He was wrong. He was wrong on a lot of levels. And my most recent book, he should really have read that and realized that what he did was wrong. But
Mhm.
Paul would never tell you that.
Yeah.
But Paul is he's obsessed with the black goo, he will tell you. And if anyone's interested in
goo.
going down this route,
Well, that was in the X Files, and it was also in Aliens Covenant, if I remember rightly, wasn't it? And the
um,
X Files movie,
I
it has something to do
don't,
with it.
I don't remember the X Files movie. Alien, which I'm a massive fan of the whole Alien genre.
Mhm.
So yeah, Covenant, of course, but it was slightly different. But yeah, um,
Mhm.
but it's but yeah, black goo basically is where it comes from. And the scientists who supposedly studied it, and many of them died, etc., at Marconi. And you can go into there is a whole history of this, be it a crypto history, a pseudo history, whatever you want to call it. Personally, I don't believe it.
Mm.
You can buy it on eBay, but don't. Okay, so it's basically um, people will sell you jars of engine oil with magnetized iron
Mm.
filings in it that just move around. You go, oh look, I've got this black goo. You see, there was
Well,
a
there's a
guy
market for everything, isn't there?
in the market for idiocy.
Yeah. Well, there always has been.
But a lot of this stuff, it just goes to show, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's me talking modern stuff or if it's Comer's Beaumont talking Damascus, the oldest city on the planet, and
Yeah.
completely moving it and changing it. We have these crypto histories, these pseudo histories, belief systems, conspiracy theory, you name it.
Yeah.
You know, and
Especially today, because we're entering what's called the age of Aquarius. And I don't know if you know much about astrology or even believe in it. Many people do not. A lot of people do.
it,
But the whole
it
idea behind
really
Aquarius
rubbish
is
song
the
back in
unusual.
the 70s, I think, wasn't
Sorry?
it? It was a really rubbish
Sorry?
song back in the 70s, wasn't it? The Age of Aquarius.
Well,
But go on, sorry,
it
yeah.
was that too. But the whole theme behind Aquarius is interest in technology and groups as well. Aquarian folk born under strong Aquarius influence tend to be group orientated. You see people dividing up into groups a lot. Science, technology, and the unusual, and the eccentric, and the bizarre tend to be very Aquarian themes. That's
Mm.
probably why we're seeing all this. The interest in the unusual probably stems from that. It's like the Hermetics say, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. Good words to live by. And that's the kind of Hermetic principle, you know.
It's a nice idea.
all
It's a,
things are all things are self-defining, as I
yeah.
like to say.
I mean, but
Yeah,
like when we talk about sort of, I don't know, like you mentioned, like who built the moon. I mean,
yeah,
you know, people still talk about, along with who shot JFK,
yep,
is you know, were the moon landings staged? And you can
mm,
read things online talking about, and there's YouTube videos, of course, talking about, you know, what did they really see when they were on the moon and they did go to the moon? And, you know, some person, no, they didn't. It was in a studio. Another said, no, they did. And they saw this. Very hard to work out where this comes from,
yeah.
or who's telling the truth, or who's what have you. I mean, did did the moon landings happen? I believe so. Yes. Um,
Yes and no, I would say.
my
I,
I have a friend, haven't seen him for a few years now. Dave was
uh,
um, a like a, how would I put this? Like a theoretical engineer, in that his job was to look at what will be possible and what do
mhm,
we need to do to get there. And one of the things he was very big on was lunar manufacturing,
yeah,
because obviously you need a firm base, but with less gravity, you can lift a massive weight with quite a small, you know, crane arm, what have you. You don't need huge infrastructure to do it because you've got less weight. You see, so that was his that was his thing. And he said, "Have you smelled moon dust?" I said, "No." And he said, "It stinks." Stink? The moon stinks. He said, "Yeah, it's carcinogenic. You shouldn't smell it anyway." But he said the moon stinks. I've smelt moon dust, you know, and
mm,
uh, how does the moon? Apparently, the moon smells of rotten eggs. You know, it's not very
okay. Haven't
not.
heard that before.
No, he did. You know, it's quite a weird thing. In fact, we were in a hotel in Inverness, the Hotel Beaumont, I believe, in Inverness, and where, if you
Of
look
course.
actually at my book on Hannibal, I
Mhm,
thank the staff there because I wrote most of it in there, and weirdly enough, we bumped into these guys. They were on TV and things like that a few years ago. These American guys who were rebuilding a B-17 Flying Fortress, and we bumped into these guys in the bar. And Dave was um, looking for a new project, and he was an engineer, and he'd done a load of aerospace work and what have you. And I think I started chatting to these guys. Dave come over. They were saying, "Hey, you guys want to give us a help? You're engineers." And I was like, I'm busy, but I think Dave did give him a hand on that project. It was like programs on Sky all about it and stuff. Amazing guys building this flying fortress bomber from World
mm.
War II. You know, and yeah, see him on TV. Oh, that'd be great. But
Nice.
but yeah, I mean, who built the moon? I mean, you know, I
Mm.
tend to think it's just the moon. I mean, it's been there for a very long time. But
Well,
again,
nothing is ever just anything, is it?
no, but I mean, you know, you look at the ancient aliens guy with the,
Yeah,
I can't think of his name for the life of me, with the big hair. My
yeah,
sister's met him, but he's got a doctorate in this stuff.
mm,
He's got a doctorate in it, and he's, you know, ancient aliens again is a crypto history. It's not a pseudo history. It's not a
Mm.
conspiracy theory. It's a crypto history. If you look at a lot of these things, they do add up. They do match up. And we,
Yep.
as a human race, as historians, scientists, what have you, we don't know how. There is a
Yeah.
question. And where there is a question, it's a fool who doesn't ask it.
Yeah.
It's probably a bigger fool who tries to answer it sometimes. You know, say, I've got the
I know
answer.
it's thankless work sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to ask that question, and it's a question to which, how does the same sort of character, I'm sure you've seen it, like the Birdman with the carrying a
Mm.
handbag and what have you, appears in Peru, but appears in Egypt, but appears in
Mm.
wherever the hell, but it's the
Yep.
same guy holding this weird bag thing in the same hand,
Yeah.
and there's hieroglyphs and symbols of aircraft and helicopters and bicycles, things that
Yeah, I know. It's
you've
all
got
over
to.
the world. This is where I was going with Ike, with Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth. This is all covered in that.
Yeah, I mean,
But
you have to look and go, well, there was something, wasn't there? Even as a layman, historian myself, but historian doesn't mean, you know, you're a historian. You've got a history degree in Scottish history, but it doesn't mean
yeah,
that historians know stuff. It just means that you try and hold yourself to a more critical view of ask the question and eschew your own bias and
yeah,
let the evidence, know how to find evidence, but let the
yeah.
evidence lead your conclusions. And yet we still don't know between the two of us, two historians. We don't know. I'm this is your field. I'm out my
Mm.
comfort zone, perhaps, but
No, that's all right.
but
Yeah. So, do
God,
you realize we've gone for a whole hour and I've not even started the presentation yet?
Jesus
So
Christ,
we should probably get started.
go on.
So this is Damascus and Cirencester. Am I saying it right? Cirencester? Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Yeah, part one. Okay, so disclaimer. So I always have to do this at the beginning of every presentation. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use, for criticism, for comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research purposes. So, as we said before, we're in the Great Deception. Hang on, I'll move the. Yeah, there we go. We're off to the side now so you can see it more clearly by Commons Beaumont. And the Great Deception was really written in the twilight of Commons Beaumont's years. It was written when he was about 80 years old and half blind, and less than 2 years later, he was dead. So this was like his final swan song, basically, to the world. And it was meant to be, I think, really a conclusion to the two earlier books, The Riddle of Prehistoric Britain and Britain, the Key to World History, which came out in 1946 and 1947. If I'm not mistaken, this one came out in 1953. So this was like his last hurrah. So it's not quite as well written for obvious reasons. The fact that he was older and he was half blind and he was dying, so you do have to factor that into consideration. So it's not his best, but for a good reason, kind of thing. So do you want to take turns going through the slides?
No, you
Doing the
just go
reading,
ahead.
or
I'm reading them as you're going. Go.
okay. So according to Beaumont, before Babylon or Jerusalem. So although Damascus was a most important city from the very earliest times preceding the coming of Abram, and long before Babylon emerged or Jerusalem became the capital of the Judeans, comparatively little has passed down to us regarding its history, and such as exists is scrappy. It must have been the center of a flourishing and important community long before Jerusalem came to the fore. In the earlier history of Israel, it was the capital of Syria and continued to play a part throughout. And you can see the map there on the right. It's not really very clear. It's not the best, but hopefully, like if you blow it up, you can kind of zoom in and see the revised geography and topography that Beaumont goes through. Any thoughts on that?
It's hard without sort of absolutely peering at it, but sort of before Babylon or Jerusalem. So Damascus, his version of
Yeah.
Damascus is London.
Yes.
Mine is that. Why are we looking at Cornwall? It's a very good question.
Because Cirencester is just kind of on the right hand side. It's just off to the right, just off the map. So you can see Cornwall, Devon is Syria, according to Beaumont. And,
Devon is Syria. I mean,
Apparently, yeah.
yeah. I mean, he's tried hard, hasn't he?
Yeah, as well, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, or Babylon or Jerusalem. I mean, I suppose the obvious thing is, he's talking about Damascus. Well, if Damascus was Cirencester,
Hmm.
then, well, Damascus still exists. It's still there. What happened
Yeah.
with real Damascus then?
Well, that's it. I mean, that's a bit of a plot hole, isn't it?
I assume, does he?
I'm sorry?
He doesn't answer this. Like Jerusalem is
No.
Edinburgh,
Yeah.
but Jerusalem exists in Jerusalem, oddly enough. And Damascus and um uh and these places is that yes, but that still exists. He doesn't
Yeah.
sort of does he not answer how there were
Well,
obviously not two places called Jerusalem, two places called
yeah.
Damascus, two places.
Well, actually, no, with Beaumont, that is the case a lot. Like, for example, I did a presentation about Dumbarton being Athens, and he
Yeah,
says the original Athens was Bath, but then there was a great catastrophe, and then the people moved further north, and they established Dumbarton, and that became Athens. And then they forgot that the original Athens was actually Bath, for example, things like that.
so what?
Also, with Babylon, he says the original Babylon was, I think, either Hamburg or Hanover, but then it
No,
was moved to Britain and then it became York. So with all of these cities, there's like two versions of it, but they're all still in the north of Europe. And you think this is a plot hole that you could park a bus in. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's pretty
it,
large.
well, it is. I mean,
Yeah,
sort of. So every single place he says is somewhere else
yeah,
still gets to exist somewhere else. It's sort of
yeah,
like if it happens once,
yeah,
once or twice, you'll be like, fair point. But it's like
yeah,
it. I have a saying in history. If the only other answer is everybody else is lying, then you've already got your answer. You know, uh,
yeah,
I think maybe this is where we're at. It's a guess. I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't normally drink on podcasts, but I'm very glad for the alcohol here because it keeps you going rather than just sort of look had this look like you've sort of sat on cold
yeah.
wet dog poo and have been told you can't move throughout the whole thing. Um,
Okay.
but I mean, I know for a fact, he didn't just say, "Oh, this was this because I said so."
Yeah.
He's quite, like I said, he backs it up with the archaeology and topography.
Mhm.
He probably uncovered a lot more. Um, Not him personally uncovered, like dug it up, but he certainly listed a lot more of the archaeology of, let's say, Cirencester,
Mhm.
and put it out for all to see. Probably more than any other author. He was really trying. He did have his value in history, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But where do we go from here?
Well, I've moved up to the side a little bit so you can see it maybe a wee bit better. He says that the English Channel was the Red Sea. The Bristol Channel was the Sea of Galilee, for example. Devon was Edom, and so was Cornwall. And Dorset was Phoenicia, according to him. And the Sea of Uxella was actually can't quite read that, the Reed Sea or the Red Sea almost, or something like that. But yeah, unfortunately, the map is a little bit squashed in there, so it's kind of hard to read it.
I
But you
don't know.
can find it on Google anyway. But yeah, Upper Galilee was the south of Wales, apparently, and things like that. So when you just look at that, yeah, I know that you've got family from that area, so it's
Yeah,
yeah.
because
So you're a
Jesus,
Galilean.
yeah, apparently, yeah,
Yeah.
makes me feel more makes me feel more exotic.
Yeah,
So where does he
sure.
take this from here? Settling in the way.
So settling in the West. By the way, feel free to jump in if you want to read some of these slides. It doesn't have to just be me. Do you want to read this one, or shall I do it?
No, no, no. You just go
Okay.
ahead. I'm here to comment. I don't want to get this wrong. Plus my eyes are not the
Okay.
greatest sometimes.
Okay. So when, by the way, I don't know why he keeps referring to Abraham as Abram. But I'm guessing there's a reason for that. But anyway,
Yeah,
uh,
it's sort of a way of trying to look authentic. You know, they've got the
maybe, yeah.
little
And
twiddle
like
here.
you do know Collins Beaumont that was changed later on. Abram became Abraham. It didn't remain Abram. But anyway,
That's edited.
so there you go. So when Abram led his followers from the very north, namely, Ur-of-the-Chaldees, the Orkney Islands, according to Beaumont, though interesting that he puts a question mark there, with the intention of settling in the west, namely in Mizraim, Egypt or Philistia, he made his way first to Damascus. In such movements, we must always recollect that in those days, great areas were yet terra incognita, mainly primeval forest inhabited by wild forest beasts, including lions and bears and savage boars and wild cattle, as well as serpents, and that communications could only be contrived by a series of such highways as existed. Now, I know instantly people are going to jump on that and say, none of these fucking things existed in Britain, it's too cold.
Well,
Well, if you
depends
go
where.
to the mysterious comet in the middle of the Earth, Beaumont makes the case that actually the climate back then was much, much warmer than it is these days, especially in the mysterious comet, which was his second book. He says that Britain in those days was actually as warm as the Mediterranean was, and these animals that existed on Earth, but as it became colder over time, they either went extinct or just moved across the Doggerland into Europe and then down into the more central areas of the world.
Yeah, I mean, we had a Middle Ages heat wave, didn't we? In the Middle Ages, you know, Scotland was subtropical for a while. You know, we had a heat wave
Mhm.
there, but also if we go further back, it depends how far back he's going, of course. And the Bible dates are very open to interpretation. You know, you've got people living for sort of 800, 900 years. Um, so yeah, I mean, you know, Scotland was on the equator once, so it depends how far back he
Mm.
wants to go, really, isn't it? You know,
Yep.
but he's said a lot of words, but hasn't said a lot in that slide. If I'm honest,
Yeah, it's
um,
just saying Abram. He came down from the Orkney Islands and he went to London first for some reason, and then went to Mizraim, which is the south of England and Wales, the southwest of England and Wales, according to him.
yeah, he's sort of setting. He's painting a picture more than giving us history or saying, "Here's how I know this," which is something you've covered before. And where
Yeah.
does he go from here? Let's.
Okay. I'll head to the next one. So the Great North Roads.
I know it
So
very
it
well.
in
Grew up on the
yeah,
Great North Road.
yeah, yeah, you're a North Londoner.
Uh,
It indicates in this matter that the great highway from the north, from Caithness to the south, led to Damascus, and this same highway was the present Great North Road, also once known as Ermine Street, after the god Hermes, which would proclaim its origin as from the Druid centre of Ur, or Samos of Thrace. So Plato, in the Critias, in his description of Atlantis, gives details of the many canals throughout the great plain of the island, and indirectly indicates roads by stating that the Atlanteans possessed war chariots for such necessitated roadways. Interesting, isn't it? Uh, Remind road. So
may
again,
I,
he's go
go
ahead.
on.
Yeah,
No, no, you go ahead. Go on.
it's interesting how he's mixing in Abrahamic and classical history
Yeah.
without even really thinking about it, and yet for most historians it'd be completely separate, and most historians would even think to mix them together. Let alone try to proclaim that anything to do with Plato had anything to do with Abraham, because you got the
I mean,
classical world and you got the biblical world. But
it,
Beaumont will go there.
it is fascinating, but I mean, when you dumb this down,
Yeah.
what he's saying is there was a road. What he's saying is that there was this road, and it's like, yeah, the
Yeah.
Great North Road was it's kind of built by the Romans, and
Yeah.
you know, and you know, what he doesn't say, of course, is who built the road. He
Mm.
doesn't tell you this. He's saying there was a road. Yeah, it's like the Yellow Brick Road. And I don't mean to appear a philistine at all, but if a historian were presenting this to me, I would be looking and saying, so you're saying there was a road,
Hmm.
yes, which is similar to another road that someone spoke about, but you're not quite sure why, and you're this guy said there was a road, and that guy said there was a road, so I'm saying it was this road. And that is me being a very. It is me being a Philistine. It is, but within reason, and when I look and I think, I physically grew up on that road, on the Great North Road in North London,
Yeah.
you do sort of go, okay, higher from the north, Caithness, the south, that Damascus, same high. I'm just reading it back. Well,
To be fair, this was from an appendix. This wasn't from a chapter. This was actually from an appendix towards the
right,
very end of the book. So there may have been earlier chapters where he actually does explain this in great detail. And as I also said previously, the Great Deception was written kind of as a conclusion and as a wrap up of
right.
Britain, the Key to World History, and the Riddle of Prehistoric Britain. So
They may have
it
covered
is
this.
kind of it is kind of predicated that you read those two before you came on to this one. I still think books should stand on their own to an extent, however, and shouldn't be completely dependent on you reading the previous volumes. And you should back it up a bit better.
It's good
You know,
marketing.
yeah,
It's good marketing if you're going to do.
yeah,
Land. But what's weird is that he's taken this sort of the whole principle of Damascus and everything and relocating it, but then he's giving us Atlantis,
yeah,
and you're like, oh, whoa,
yeah. He's all
where
over the
did it go?
place. Yep.
It's very scattergun. It's almost like blind you with science. A lot going on, and then what? Just believe me, it's fine. Keep going. Turn the page. It's good.
Yeah. Like sleight of hand kind of thing, almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you can't beat them, confuse them.
Well, yeah, basically. So prehistoric thoroughfares. So Hermes, among other activities, was the deity protecting roads and traffic, and in both Greece and Britain, his torso in stone was placed on main crossroads, whereby many roads were named after him. Damascus conducted considerable trade in both east and west and by sea. In the west with Gades and other cities there, where again roads were implied or are implied, as also was the case with Tyre, Portland, and Sidon or Seaton. It may be a curious fact to some, but London possessed many prehistoric thoroughfares which either emanated from or passed through it, all in one direction than any other city in Britain.
I'm looking at this. I mean, sort of, it's in the west with now Gades. It was just another name for Cadiz in Spain. No cities are again. The case again. I'm trying to work out how Tyre becomes Portland Bill. Sidon becomes Seaton. Maybe curious fact to some, but London possessed more prehistoric thoroughfares which either emanated from or passed through it, all in one direction, than any other city in Britain. Well, yes, no. I mean, it's a city is where it is because it's there and it's quite useful to be there. And in London, I don't think it had that many. To be fair, I mean, there was a couple of bridges. It was a small place when Boudica burned London down, or at least North London. Anyway, thank you very much. It didn't get to my bit. My bit was all field back then, but it was a small trading town. But again, does he have a date for this, or is he?
Well, as I said before, this was an appendix. It wasn't a main chapter within the book, so I think it's just kind of summarizing information rather than getting into explicit details. But then again, the Great Deception is notoriously weak for this.
Yeah.
Britain, the Key to World History, and the Riddle of Prehistoric Britain were more detailed than this book because they came earlier, 1946 and 1947. But it's just the general. Like I say, this was a swan song. It's just trying to put the nail on the coffin with all these things. Summarizing.
One of the obvious things is the text doesn't actually match the picture, so none of the roads he's got are actually going through.
I know. I just noticed that. Well, that wasn't Beaumont's fault. That was my fault.
Okay, that was right. So Beaumont was right and you were wrong. That's where we're going.
Yeah, I know. I just noticed when I was looking at the map there, I thought, fucking hell, no, there was actually emanate out of London. But
No,
no,
no.
I was focusing more on the roads surrounding London, the main kind of thoroughfares in old times kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that wasn't Beaumont messing up. That was my fault.
But
Anyway.
he doesn't sort of
Yeah.
and obviously we credit the Romans with building most of the roads because they had road building, techniques and systems and what have you, and they were very good at it. And we're still using Roman roads to this day, such as the Great North Road, such as Watling Street, um, which I'm sure is there somewhere. But he might have just called it something else. But most of those roads seen on the picture are Roman roads.
Mm.
Unless he's crediting someone else with road building abilities, consistent ones, then it's sort of a bit up in the air, isn't it? I mean, he's trying hard. I think we said this
Yeah.
before. He's trying hard. He's marrying these things up, but to what end and why we never find out. But we'll continue. We'll see where he goes with this. Are you feeling
Yeah.
very convinced by a bit of Comins yet, or?
No comment.
He's, you know what? He's a fascinating character. He deserves the study, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. On certain issues, you're just like, my God, he's really onto something. And on other things, you're just like, what?
Yeah, but sometimes this happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes these people they get one thing, but they're actually right, and
Yeah.
then they are convinced that everything else they do is right. But that doesn't mean that everything they do is crap or everything
Yeah.
they do is invented. Normally you find characters like this, and you've got to look for the bit they did, which is historically actually important. And because a lot of them actually started with something that was probably right and that didn't stop, assumed everything else was true.
Yeah.
Let's
You have
have a
to
look.
have the ability to compartmentalize, I think.
Yeah.
Just because they're right about one thing doesn't mean they're right about everything, but just because they're wrong about three things doesn't mean they're, wrong about the seven other things. You know.
And I think one of the biggest, we say one lie is enough to question all truths. One of the things that I get from this guy is he's not lying. He's
No, he's convinced of it.
to be a liar, you have to know you're lying, and this guy believes he's right. So
Oh yeah, he
he's
absolutely
trying hard
believes it.
though.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I noticed some of the flaws of my slides now that I'm going through them. Like one map was too squashed up, and the other one didn't show any roads actually coming out of London, but it did show you some of the other roads. But
No, I mean,
the images were me. I mean, I'm kind of new at this. I haven't done a lot of this, so maybe not the best, but
no, that's fine. I mean, I didn't know if it was him, if it was you. It was one
no,
of the
me.
things that just it struck me in my literal brain.
The images are all me. The images on the right are all me. But anyway,
Cool.
so in the time of Saint Paul, there was the thoroughfare in Damascus called Straight, so named still as it passes through Lincoln to the north. I've been working on that, by the way, the Lincoln presentation, and otherwise called Ermine Streets. These factors afford evidence of the importance of prehistoric London as the commercial centre of the ancient British world, which I can believe because it's on a river. It's on the Thames. Another important centre was where Cirencester stands in the area of the Great Plain. The name accorded to it Damascus. Now, we don't know whether he means London or Cirencester because he's not a very good writer in that regard, but I'm
Yeah.
assuming he means London. His Latinized version for the Hebrew was Damasek, and various theories to account for it have been advanced. One being that it was a corruption of Tammuz or Thammuz, the Syrian and Babylonian god.
Which, of course, instantly you see where he's going. He's going with Thames, isn't he? The River Thames.
Yep.
And so that is, yeah.
And by the way, that image there on the right is one of the first things you see when you go into the National Museum of Scotland in
Yeah.
Edinburgh.
It's,
Interestingly.
yes, I do know it actually. But I should do. I worked there, didn't I? National
Oh, I mean
Museum.
for the audience.
Yeah, no, fair point.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's a very scattergun approach. It's a very blind science approach, isn't it? Name accorded Damascus is a Latinized version for the Hebrew was Damasek, and various theories to account for it have been advanced. So, yeah,
You do have to wonder.
Someone said, and there's a theory that someone else said.
You do have to wonder if he's pulling a bit of a Del Boy here. You know what I mean? Somebody said that, and then you find out it was him.
Yeah, it probably was him. Yeah. I mean, it's. You see, it depends. I mean, this is in the time of St. Paul. I've got to be honest. I don't know when St. Paul was around, but I mean, again, it depends if you trust your Bible history or not. But again, sort of London as the commercial centre, but it really sort of wasn't. I mean, you've got to remember that, certainly when the Romans came here, there was very, very little in London at all. The Romans famously, of course, the Thames, we think of the Thames as being very deep because we built banks along it, but the Thames was once a lot wider than it is and therefore a lot shallower. When the Romans came here, all the tribes were gathered on the north bank of the Thames, and the Romans got an elephant to get into the water and walk through the water because it was a lot shallower. Just like I don't know, couple of guys on top of it or what have you. Of course, these tribes had never seen a bloody elephant. By the time the elephant got to the north bank, all the tribes had legged it. And that was the end of that battle. What the bloody hell is that thing? But the idea that there was this some trading hub, London really wasn't. It was very forgotten. Cities such as York, Colchester, etc., had far more prominence than London. Like I said, when Boudicca burnt London, it was an afterthought. There was not a lot there, so it's very hard to see it. Knowing history as we know, surely it's like, well, what happened with Damascus? And you'd have to change it. We talk about this ripple effect, don't we? How would you change all of that? But he's like, nothing else changed, just this here. And the second I saw Tammuz or Thammuz, where he's going. He's going with Thames, isn't he?
Yep.
But ironically enough, here is this guy with a handbag again, not the eagle face, but obviously he's got the big Persian beard and everything else. He's still got the wings. Still got the wings. You'll see various versions of this chap on pyramids and stuff like that. So there's always that little nod and wink, to something bigger, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Shall I move on to the next one?
Yeah, please.
So, yep, exactly what you thought, Father Thames. So, certainly Tammuz, described as the son of deep water, otherwise of Poseidon, might be the origin of the name Father Thames in the region called variously Thamnas, or Thamnatha by Josephus, all relating to the region of the River Thames or the Thames Valley, with which Damascus had the closest interest as part of its original territories as far as Cirencester, the border of Syria in the west. It is one of the interesting survivals to students of antiquity that, whilst place names varied considerably through the centuries and often underwent exchange of masters, that certain names have continued to survive all vicissitudes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certain names still survive. Toponymy and etymology of places and stuff like that. It is a study. It's certainly helped me when I was in Spain finding Hannibal's first battlefield. But one of the obvious things, though, he's talking about a river being so important, obviously, to Damascus. Damascus doesn't really have a river. It's on the coast. It's on the coast. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not the greatest expert on Damascus all of a sudden, but to my knowledge, Damascus is kind of, there is no great river in the real Damascus. So how does he marry that up? He doesn't
exactly.
Unless you you know, and like I said, I don't mean to appear, you know, Philistine or Mr. Critical, but you know, if you present me with that, the first thing I would say was, "Where is that?" And if someone said, "Oh, is this famous river in Damascus? You've never heard of it, idiot?" I go, "No, fair point," but I don't believe there is one.
There's kind
Uh,
of a canal that there's kind of a canal that goes through it, but it's not really a big river like the Thames or anything like that.
yeah, when does it date from? Or I suppose that wouldn't matter to.
Well, I just looked it up on Google Earth,
Okay,
basically. I went on their Google Maps, Google Earth, and like Damascus River, but that's actually the very last slide, actually.
right, okay.
So we
So,
will get back to that. Yeah.
but I mean, it doesn't seem to have any kind of prominence. You know, everyone knows what the Thames is.
Mhm.
I'm gonna. I have to put this one down to wishful thinking, don't I?
Fair enough. Yeah,
But yeah,
but I love
Thames.
it.
Second
Sorry.
or third Thames, isn't it? He's going Thames.
Yeah. Well, again, he's marrying up mythology with Abrahamic theology. He's got
Yeah.
Poseidon, and then 3 lines later, he's talking about Josephus. Most historians wouldn't have the balls to go there, talking about a Greek or Greco-Roman deity, and then 3 lines later, he's talking about Josephus, one of the most
And
important and famous Jewish historians.
yeah, and then previously he's taken Atlantis, and then he's going as you
Yeah, it's all over the fucking place.
yeah,
It really is. It's all
10
over
out
the
of
map,
10 for effort.
literally. Yeah, literally and figuratively, it's all over the map. So the Great Plains at Gades. One thing about Beaumont in these chapters, well, actually, this was an appendix, but one thing about some of these chapters in and appendixes in the Britain, the Key to World History and the Great Deception, they're a huge Visit England advert in many ways.
He'd put people off,
So,
wouldn't he?
well, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, of course, but the name of Thamnas seems to be related to the river god Tammuz or Thammuz. Among the ancient relics of London was discovered a life-size figure in marble of its river god, which may have been what we just saw in the last slide. The head and torso of Hellenistic or Syrian type, found concealed deep in the mud at Walbrook, one of the two rivers which flow through Londinium, like the two rivers of Damascus. Damascus lay in the eastern extremity of the region later named Colysyria, I think is how you say it, which traditionally stretched. Sorry?
Best I could come up with, yeah.
Uh,
Which traditionally stretched.
From the beginning of the Great Plain at Gades in the west to the Euphrates of the North Sea in the east. So apparently the Euphrates is actually the North Sea. Now, I will say, going back to his previous books, he's saying that the North Sea was a lot smaller back in the old days because you had the Doggerland area between Britain and Europe. And at one time, you could actually walk the length between Norway and Scotland.
Yeah. But then
So
the
it went
Great
from being like a
Plain
river to a sea.
at Gades, which is Gades, or however you pronounce it, is still Cadiz, Spain.
Mm.
You don't get much of a Great Plain there. Well, it depends which way you go, I suppose. Um, but you know, to say that there was a figure found in the marble, sorry, found in the marble, sorry, Leicester's figure in marble, sorry, found in the Thames,
Mm.
or in one of the tributaries to the Thames, doesn't tell you a lot, you know, because
Yeah.
we've found, you know, there's Roman coins here, there's Greek coins, there's a lot of different things because, you know, certain people, particularly Romans, of course, nicked them. They went to Greece, they liberated that, etc. They bury a hoard or something, and you know, and off they went. And it's, I think, going by the archaeology,
Yeah.
um, you know, when I, and again, when going back to say my own work with more ancient things, I like finding Hannibal's first battlefield, and I remember one of the biggest things I had to overturn was that the idea everyone said, "Oh no, it's at this place, you know, Colmenadia Reka,"
Yeah.
and I said, "Okay, why?" And they said, "Oh, the archaeology, right? What did they find there?" And you know, I made the point in the book that it looked like the most blatant attempt to plant evidence by people who had no idea what evidence looked like. And even if it hadn't been planted, it was just stupid. You know, we found some spear points, just like people use spears for hundreds and thousands of years. I mean, it could be anyone's spear points. Um, Oh, we found a metal helmet with a bird on top. It's like, that's Gallic. Yes, the gold came down that way. That's nothing. Oh yeah, but we found a bronze statue of or ingot with a image of Medusa on it. Yeah, and it's like, that's Greek. All of those things, spear point. They could have been. It could have been Gauls who murdered Romans and nicked their stuff and buried them or lost them. It could have been Romans who murdered Gauls and did. It could have been anyone, everyone. It could have been planted. None of this said it was a Carthaginian battle whatsoever. Against Celtiberian tribes. No Romans involved, no Gauls involved, no nothing. So none of this is, no Greeks, of course, none of this was relevant. But of course, it happened here because the archaeology, you see, this was found and thereby. And I looked in, I was like, well, this is crap. This is rubbish, And of course, when they came up, and I'm sure you've read this, when they came up with Hannibal's magical lost sword. I'm sure you've read this, and I was like, well,
like the Wallace sword, the
no,
Sterling, aye.
But the thing is, I don't know if you've sort of read the articles in Ancient Origins or anything like that, but this is where we found Hannibal's magical lost sword. And I was like, okay, well, firstly, Hannibal is not recorded as having a magical sword, and he's not recorded as having lost it. Okay. So what you got is a sword. Yes, a sword, they said in Spain, but it's a stone. And I was there with my Spanish historian friend Antonio, and we were looking, going, it's going to be a stone, isn't it? It's just going to be a flat, long bit of stone, isn't it? Like that. They said, no, it's magical. They said because when it was the centerpiece of the royal armories, and when the royal armories burnt down, the flames were repelled by the sword, which is also a stone, and there was this and there was that, and I was like, do we have this sword? And so eventually we go along to the, and this is relevant, I hope, we go along to the royal armories, and they come out with this thing. There it is. And I just laughed. I said, look, that is a 1700s reproduction of a Spanish falcata sword. It's never been anywhere near rain, let alone water. So this ain't, is it? Oh no, okay, it's backstage. So they leave this crowd backstage, and I'm going, it's a stone, isn't it? It's a stone. And it was a sword. It was actually a sword.
Yeah.
And it had this sort of weird, massively bulbous, encrusted sort of hilt, etc., etc. Well, anyway, so they gave us, you couldn't take photos because it's magical, you see, in ancient. But they gave us the photos and X-rays and everything. And I took it back to the leading sword expert in the UK, certainly in Scotland, a man called Paul MacDonald. And I was in his armory, and he laughed his head off. And he said, come here. And he reached up on the wall, said, there you go, that's it. And I was like, yes, that's the same sword. And he said, it's called a Messer. It's the first mass manufactured sword, manufactured in Germany, blah, blah, blah. The hilt there, he says, that is concretion by erosion. It's like the bubbling of rust in your car, particularly if you remember cars from the 80s and 90s, And he said that would occur in 50 years. He said, literally, what you got here is someone got this crap sword, it broke, and it was a load of shit, threw it in a river. And someone in the late 1500s found this as Hannibal's magical lost sword. And because you have they believe this sword beat back the flames, and they've had to plant evidence when the king said, "You sure this is magical?" And, oh yeah, we're just going to go and check for some evidence. And it's created a whole battlefield and everything that just didn't exist from a crap sword that broke. So we come back to Coman's Beaumont here, and we're like, and going, yeah, it's kind of like that, isn't it?
Check out the language. Concealed deep in the mud at Walbrook. And I looked this up because I'd have got a picture of this, I would have put it in, obviously. We just have his word for it. Concealed deep in the mud. It sounds like a conspiracy or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but just sat there in the mug. Someone dropped it or whatever, So someone dropped it, someone lobbed it in, someone made it again, relic, a life-size figure of a river god found in a river. Because someone probably threw it in as a sacrifice or as an offering to say, make sure I don't drown in the river, which is quite normal. Why would they not? That was normal stuff, but it's been, as you said, it's been concealed. It's been hidden.
Yeah. It's all in the language, the way that you put it.
Yeah, but it is.
The idea.
It's language is very important. If
The way
you
you say it.
yeah, I mean, like I've read things about myself where he confessed that it was this or that this happened. I'm like, I didn't confess. Feels like you're sort of beat down and forced to say, and I'm like, no, I've always said that. I don't confess. I just said, yeah, that happened. You know me, of course. Outside of podcast world, of course, we know each other personally as friends, and
Yeah.
I'm very straight talking. If I believe something today, I believe it tomorrow.
Yeah.
If I change my mind, I'll tell you that as well. Um, I've
Well,
never been
is
taught to confess anything.
one thing though, is Walbrook a river that flows through London? Walbrook.
Um, but you've got to remember that a lot of the rivers, a
Mhm,
lot of the tributary rivers that come down into London,
mhm.
um, Pims Brook, the River Lee, etc. A lot of them, yeah, the River Lee's still going and things, but a lot of them have been built over. A lot of them
Right. Yeah.
are um, underground rivers. London is full of underground rivers. So to say that you hadn't heard of it
Mhm.
isn't to say very much.
Okay.
Um, Most of them have been built over, so you would potentially never know. You can find maps online of all the underground rivers in London, and Edinburgh here has them as well.
Yeah.
The Foul Burn,
Mhm.
because Fountain Bridge used to be Foul Bridge, didn't it? And
Mm.
the Foul Burn, which was literally because people used to dump sewage in it,
Of all the yeah.
is still part of the Edinburgh Greater Metropolitan Sewage System to this day. But no one wanted to live in Foul Bridge. They changed the name to Fountain Bridge, trying to make it sound posher.
Mm.
But yeah, a lot of them have become part of the London and Metropolitan Sewage System. A lot of them are just underground rivers that flow into the Thames.
It just occurred to me, Foul Bridge. It got that name because it's stank.
It did. It did. Anyway, from Fountain Bridge, they had to change the name because no one wanted to live
You
there.
know.
Because it was famous for the Foul Bridge or Fountain Bridge rubber company, which made the first ever, Geronimo, my friend. If you remember the advert from the 80s, like the first condoms mass manufactured in the UK, and
Yeah.
they also made about sort of 4 million pairs of boots for the First World War and things like that. But yeah, yeah, they were condom
Oh,
manufacturers.
oh man, it's called
Yeah,
Foul Bridge because it reeked. Oh dear,
it
that
did.
is so funny.
It did, I know. It's supposed to be a
Yeah.
sort of funky area now, isn't it, Fountain Bridge? But
Yeah.
yes, Foul Bridge,
Have
and
you ever heard of? Sorry.
the Foul Burn was the river. It's still called the Foul Burn to this day.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Irish alphabet called Ogham?
No.
Okay, well maybe come back to that.
Mm.
So in Colossyria, were such districts as Bashan, adjoining a part of Gilead, the chalk country, where of old in Bashan ruled Og, a name given to Abram. Again, no proof, no evidence, just believe him.
Mm.
To modernize these areas, Bashan incorporated much of the present Gloucestershire, and Thamnas, the Thames Valley, lay east of it. Samson's adopted city called Timnath, a variation on Thames. Again, no proof, no evidence, just believe him.
That's a bit loose, isn't it?
It is a bit lay in Bashan and corresponds even with Cricklade on the Upper Thames, which yet bears the name of Saint Samson as a secondary description. Bashan was from the earliest times a part of the territories of the Philistines and Egyptians, otherwise Mizraim, where Abram, by strength of arms, established his power. It was the most fertile country, noted for its oaks, its bulls, kine, and rams, or sheep.
There's a lot of believe me in this, isn't it?
Yeah,
Believe me, let's keep going. I mean,
yeah.
Crickdale on the Upper Thames. What
Cricklade. Yeah,
is it? A Cricklade could be a bit
yeah,
Cricklewood or
yeah,
something like that. No one knows.
yeah.
This is this and that is that because I said so. Oh,
Basically,
Abraham
yeah,
was known as Og. Is he?
yeah,
Okay. Um, it's very, very. This is a bit like this, isn't it?
yeah.
Um, Timnath, variation of Thames, for which he's given us at least 2 or 3 other variations already.
Yeah.
Um,
Tammuz or Thammuz.
yeah, I mean, he might as well tell us it's Tidworth, you know, or Tadworth is another place, or Tadcaster, or
You, you have to
Teddington.
wonder. You have to wonder whether Beaumont was trying to start a cult or something, because it has that kind of vibe to it, doesn't it? A little bit.
Yes, no, I mean, this is where I started. It doesn't look like this. When I was talking about sort of the Bible says you must believe this. This
Mm-hmm.
is fact. He's not doing that. He's not trying to. The Book of Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a belief, you must follow it. The Bible, here's a belief, you must follow it. Um, but it's like he's compelled to write it, but he's not trying to do anything with it.
Yeah.
He's just writing what he really believes is true. But I think on this one, he's way down that rabbit hole, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Uh,
like I said, this was written like 2 years, less than 2 years probably before he died. So he's just trying to. It is a bit rushed. He's just trying to get it out there before he snuffs it, basically.
yeah.
That's the impression I got. But you go back to Og, that's interesting when you get into the old Brehon law with Ireland. They have this alphabet called Ogham.
Mm,
And, according to Beaumont, this is a little bit loose, admittedly, but according to Beaumont, Ur-of-the-Chaldees, or Ur, where Abraham came from, because remember, Abram is Abraham,
mm,
was in the Orkney Islands in the north of Scotland. Then you got this Irish connection with the Ogham alphabet and all this sort of thing, and the Brehon law, and it's a lot like runes that are scratched onto stone. It's like a very primitive form of language, but at the same time quite sophisticated. You can look
mm,
into it and check it out. And that ties into a lot of things to do with like Lewis Spence talking about like the ancient history of Britain and Atlantis and all this sort of thing. So the idea that Og was Abram, there is a bit of a connection there that this all came from the north and all came from Scotland and Ireland and Britain, all this kind of thing. It's loose, but it's not non-existent. You know.
he's speeding through it, certainly.
Yep.
And sometimes you can see this, in the Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. You can find this bit where he's like, oh, I'm gonna go, I'm literally dying. He knew he was dying. He had throat cancer, and he sort of speeds up, and then he gets loose, and then he comes back and goes, sorry, panic. I'm better now. Let's finish this book properly. And you can actually read this really loose, obvious sort of few chapters where he thinks he's going, and then he has a last sort of resurgence. But okay, let's take him on. Come on. What else is he going to give us?
The other thing I like as well, well, not like as such, but the other thing I find interesting is that he says where Abram by strength of arms established his power. And when you read the Bible version of Abraham, maybe this is why he's sticking with Abraham. Maybe that's one of the reasons, because when you read the Bible version of Abraham, he's like a shepherd and he's kind of like a landowner. He's not really presented as a warlord, but Beaumont seems to be presenting them that way. By strength of arms established his power. That sounds like a warlord muscling in, taken over by force of arms. It's not really what you get in the Bible.
But yet, once
But,
again, he's not. He differs from their known history, but doesn't tell you why.
yeah.
I mean, it's been a very my. I went to a church school, but it's been a very long time since I've done anything biblical. Barring sort of
Yeah.
the obvious stories. But yeah, he differs from the established history, but doesn't say why he's pursuing his great goal. He doesn't deal with the periphery, which is
Yeah.
leaves you very open to interpretation. That one. Go on, we'll see what he comes up with next.
So this slide is just a map on the one side, on the right, just to give you the topography and the geography, where the River Thames is located, where the Thames Valley is located. That you can see all these rivers, flowing into that part of England, and where Gloucestershire is located. So this was the empire, if you like, or the conquered territory by Abraham, or Abram, as he likes to say, as Beaumont likes to say.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's just my interpretation, but my interpretation when reading the Old Testament was not that Abraham was a great and powerful warlord. He was a powerful and wealthy man, but I didn't get the impression that he was like a conqueror or anything like that. Maybe that's just how I read it. And the image there on the left is just like, what he says before. It was a fertile country noted for its oaks, its bull, its kine, and its rams or it's sheep. And I just decided to put the sheep in because of the emphasis on the ab-ram, the ram part. Like it's
Okay.
like like a male sheep kind of thing. I'm not saying Abraham is a sheep. That's not what I'm saying. But
Maybe you just
the
like
idea that it's sorry.
maybe you just like sheep. I mean,
Well, you
who
said
knows?
that, not me. Not me.
Connect.
That's not my words. But the idea of like a ram is sort of like an aggressive animal that charges in. So this is the subtlety here with Beaumont describing Abraham as Abraham, like this aggressive character who's taken over this area through like strength and through force, like a charging ram. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. I don't know, but that's kind of how I
With
looked at it.
Beaumont, you know, I don't think you're going to be wrong guessing anything with him. But it took me a while to work out. Was that we're looking at the Thames Valley from from the east and going up. You know, if the
Yeah,
Isle of Wight wasn't there, I'd be stuck.
yeah, the Isle of Wight's over there on the left hand side. Yep, and yeah, I kind of tilted the map a little bit so you could kind of see it in relation to like the south of England and Wales, like the southwest and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I wanted to focus kind of on London,
Hmm.
and then like where from London, what direction you go in. It's like a diagonal line from London. But anyway, so here on the right we've got this cameo by Bill Clinton.
Or perhaps Vincent Kennedy McMahon, if you've read the news recently.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
heard about that. Yeah.
yeah, that was fun. Um,
Oh yeah.
Short course of Gilead, it stretched north to Worcestershire.
Yep.
To the
Go on, read it if you want.
Okay, so bordered on the east by the chalk hills of Gilead, it
Yep.
stretched north to Worcestershire, where stood Samaria, to the
Yep.
border of Gadara,
Mm-hmm.
as far as the city of Succoth, later called, oh God,
Scythiopolis.
Scythopolis. The present little township of Shurston between Bristol and Malmesbury. Northeastwards, it reached Cirencester.
Mm-hmm.
Long before Babylon rose to prominence, Damascus exercised great political power over these parts in the region of Saron, where stood the city named Heliopolis in the Greek. So again, we've got, when Heliopolis exists, we know this. Uh, the funny thing is, it's one of those words that can raise a giggle, suck off. But there is
Only if you're dirty minded.
yes, I know. But there is a Suckoff Street, Suckoff Avenue, something like that, off the Ravelston Dykes here in Edinburgh. Because every time I drive along it, I end up giggling. You see, and Mrs. Ricky keeps nudging me and calling me a 12-year-old. So Suckoff does exist in some way, shape, or form. Although I couldn't tell you more than that I recognize the word because it makes me giggle every time I drive along the street. But chalk hills of Gilead, fine.
Mm.
It stretched north to Worcestershire, west to Samaria, to the border of Gadara, as far as the city of Saka, let it call. So I thought this. It again. It doesn't sort of. It doesn't really tell you how. If you actually put it down, all you've really got is chalk hills, because there's chalk hills. I'm saying it's here. If you break this all the way down, if you see what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
unless I'm massively, massively wrong, I don't know. And I mean, I don't know. Where are you making this out to be going? Because I'm just reading there were chalk hills, so it must be here.
No, yeah. I mean, essentially. Um, I think really what I'm reading into it is Damascus or London stretched, into these areas and exercised a great political power. So, like, London dominated all this area back then, albeit under the name of Damascus, if you want to go along with what you're saying. The region of Saron, by the way, Saron just means Cirencester.
Did
I'll just
Beaumont
split this
ever
into three
go
parts.
to these places, so far as you know? Did he go to the Holy Lands and things, or did he just travel around the UK and say it was here?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I read Rebel in Fleet Street, which was his autobiography, which is up there.
Yeah.
Can't remember really, to be honest. But Babylon was York, so you had these. The thing is, with this compressed geography and topography, is all these things are literally right on top of each other, and it becomes
Yeah.
a bit hard to believe. Whereas in the main version of history, they're all kind of spread out across the Mediterranean and the Middle East,
Yeah.
But in Beaumont's version, they're all right on top of each other. And you've got the classical world. This is really where it's a stretch. You've got the classical world and you've got the Abrahamic world right on top of one another.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Mediterranean, they're split, kind of thing. You got Greece is here, Judea's over there. But in this version, they're literally on top of each other.
You're literally piling about sort of 20 different countries on top of the UK as is
Yeah.
now, and you know
And it's not a big island.
no, it's not
You
that
know,
big.
no.
Are we okay? Just gonna say, are we okay just to take 5 for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
Great. So I need to.
Go to
I
the
need
bathroom.
to yeah, something like that. Yeah. Give me
All
5
right.
minutes.
Yeah, no bother, mate.
Yeah, I didn't go for a shit.
All right. So I guess we'll just go to the next slide.
Go on.
All right. So the land of Eden. Do you want to do this one, or will I do it?
I can do it. In later days,
Okay.
after the original downfall of Egypt, Damascus possessed considerable influence in the land of Eden, Somerset, and probably largely influenced the trade between the two. For at the mouth of the Bristol Avon lay Gades, also named Tarshish, with its Decapolis, including Scythopolis, Shurston, Gadara, Clifton, right, Philadelphia, originally Rabath Ammon, Bath, and other places of early importance.
Yeah.
And this is mixing up a lot of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Also,
like,
something that jumped out at me is Bath was Rabath Ammon, but it was also Athens as well, but not the Athens we think of now. It was the original Athens that was destroyed before. At some point, you're just like, huh? You're just scratching your head.
yeah, and sort of. So obviously he's looked at. You've got the picture of Glastonbury Tor there, which is
Yeah.
it's a lovely, wonderful place. Obviously has our own legends, Arthurian legends, and things like that.
Mhm.
But the mouth of Bristol, Avon lay Gades again, which is Cadiz. But then you've got Scythopolis, which of course the Scythians were in into sort of what is now southern sort of Russian territory and what have you.
Yeah.
Gadara I've not heard of, but Clifton.
Mhm.
Clifton's well, it's a nice little suburb of Bristol. I've been there, but I mean it's Philadelphia, which of course was in Egypt, um,
Mhm.
but originally Bath. Okay, and other places of early, but oh, the
Well,
original downfall
yeah.
of Egypt. When? Where? He doesn't. He sort of a massive event. He's throws it. Uses it as a throwaway line, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it is covered in Britain, the key to world history. To be fair, like I say, this book is more of a summary than anything else.
Yeah.
But the idea that Eden or Somerset is the land of Eden, I will say this much: it's not a hard sell. You know.
It's a pretty part of the world, Somerset. It is. But you know, I'm not. I'm having been to a lot. A lot of these places. That Clifton is in any way some sort of um, historical site. You go really. Um, yeah, Bath is lovely, but obviously Bath known for the Roman bath, since named that, etc. The Romans don't leave us anything of of importance there. I mean, so he's, as you say, not a hard sell. He's saying, "Oh, there's this wonderful idyllic land. You see Somerset,
Yeah.
but he's trying hard. He is trying hard on this one.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I've got an American friend of mine who lives out in, I think it's Korea now. He used to live in Thailand. Not Thailand, Taiwan, excuse me, Taiwan. And when he visited Britain, he said the only city in Britain that was more beautiful than Edinburgh was Bath.
You know, I've got a couple of friends in Bath. I've never been to Bath,
Mm.
but it is supposed to be, you know, a very, very beautiful place. But that's now, you know,
Mm.
and so it's it was ancient Philadelphia, which was in Egypt, of course. People don't know that Philadelphia is a place in Egypt, but yeah, it's not. He's not giving me much here. He's not giving me much. Again, it's believe me because I said so.
Yeah.
But God loves a trier.
Yeah. See, it's like I said earlier on, the trouble with Beaumont is he doesn't give you enough. The trouble
Yeah,
with David Icke is he repeats himself over and over and over again,
too
but
much.
he does at least try to back it up in many cases. Sometimes there is that element also with Icke, to be fair, of just kind of believe him because he says so, but not nearly as bad as Beaumont, not even close. You know,
I
you're
think,
better to repeat yourself to emphasize a point than just to say it once and confuse the fuck out of everyone. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, I think to produce anything of this magnitude, you would need vast tomes, not just well, read my two previous books and you got it in there, you know. And I've sort of seen a wee bit of his work, and it's going, well, this is this because it's that, and this the landscape as described in this ancient text doesn't match up with this place, but it does match up with this place here, and it's like, well, because there are three hills or something, you know. You know, that any three hills that could be, you know, it could be Glencoe where they're quite obvious, or it could be, you know, three vastly disparate hills over various areas, you know, and so you've
Mm.
got three hills. Oh, well, that's all right, and it's the same place.
Well,
Um,
he thought that Glencoe was Thermopylae. I'm guessing that's not going to surprise you at this point.
no, no.
Yeah.
I mean, there's uh, the plan at the, you know, the for the massacre of the McDonald's at Glencoe was, yes, it was prima facie similar to the Battle of Thermopylae. It was, you know, it wasn't that dissimilar, but entirely different circumstances all over the shop, you know. So yeah,
Yeah.
again,
Well,
it's
sorry, just to interrupt. Actually, I'm kind of going to a whole other presentation here, so I'll just briefly summarize it. According to Beaumont, the Persians were not really Iran in his version. I'm sure that will not surprise you.
yeah,
In his version, the Persians were actually kind of like the Russians and the Hungarians in Eastern Europe invading Scotland, and they came in through Glencoe, attempt to invade Britain basically, and they were stopped by the Spartans or the Lacedaemonians, who were actually the Scots. I think they were actually Clan Campbell, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. I'm not 100%. I can't remember because it's good off memory. But yeah, it was one of the Scottish clans, one of the predominant ones, were the Spartans who stopped this Eastern invasion, this
right.
Eastern European invasion into into Glencoe and east of Scotland. I can't remember. I don't know if the Spartans were Clan Campbell or not. I'm going off memory there. I might be wrong on that, but yeah. So that was. But anyway, that's a kind of a sidelight.
I mean, again, like I said, anyone vaguely familiar with, say, the Glencoe massacre could look and go, "Oh, that's a bit like Thermopylae," which, of course, ancient Greek history would have been very big in Comyn's Beaumont's um, education, the things that were taught them. But it's a very superficial reference. You know, it's a standard pinning and outflanking movement on limited ground. I mean, you know. He's sort of taken that times a million and then made it something huge. But
Yeah.
as I say, God loves a trier. You know, I mean, like I said, and I'll reiterate, one of the amazing things is that this man wasn't publicly eviscerated when he wrote this. You know, and you can go back to histories 1685, I believe it was. Professor George Sinclair, first ever professor of mathematics at Glasgow University, wrote his book, Satan's Invisible World Discovered, in which, of course, you open the book and where's Satan's Invisible World? It's Edinburgh, isn't it? Yes, Edinburgh. Satan lives in Edinburgh. All my sources are so good they're beyond veracity, he said. They're that good that I don't need to name my sources. They're that good. Just don't go to Edinburgh. It's an atrocious place. And, this is the 1600s, and a professor from St Andrews University publicly eviscerated him and called him every kind of fool going. And it was weird because, in fact, George Sinclair was a very clever man, an engineer, wrote several excellent books on things like hydrostatics and things like that. And then he comes out with this. So it's not that dissimilar, really, is it? From saying that Damascus was London to saying that Satan's invisible world is obviously Edinburgh. I mean, where does one stop? Except
That would be a bestseller in Glasgow.
well, yeah. Well, they reprinted it weirdly enough in 1814.
Yeah.
But then you can still find copies of it. But I think the point being that he was, whereas a guy in the 1680s was publicly hauled over the coals by a professor from St Andrews saying, "What the bloody hell are you doing?" Whereas this guy in the 1940s and 50s,
Yeah.
no one, excuse the terminology, no one farts in his direction. He got away with it scot free.
No, I'm not totally sure about that. I haven't read his autobiography in a while. I'm sure he must have gone through something. And people were like, "Are you fucking serious, mate?" I'm sure one or two people must have been of that opinion. Like, mate, what are you on about?
Yeah, but I mean,
Um,
he didn't seem to be like a public outcast or, become like the David Irving of his day or something like that. He seems to have avoided any kind of, sanction or any kind of, this guy's a byword for lunatic. He seems to
well,
have got away with it, which is sort of
I
adds
will
to
say,
his longevity.
I will say one thing for Beaumont. It does not strike me as somebody who is anti-Semitic or anything like that. Like, he's just saying that it happened somewhere else. He's not saying that the Jews are evil or anything like that. He's just saying the Jews are not who you think they were.
No,
It's located somewhere else.
I think he's described as like something like an Anglo-Israelite, which is
Yeah, British.
they were us
Yeah,
because bear in mind he was born in the Victorian era. It couldn't happen to anyone else but us, the British.
yeah.
So obviously it was all here. So we are one and the same. So he probably in that respect wouldn't be um, anti-Semitic. He's
No.
just trying to pretend that something. He'd have grown up with the Bible, etc. He'd have. It comes very much. If you listen to the words of the great hymn Jerusalem, was
No.
Jerusalem builded here? And did those feet in ancient times? And if you
Well,
look at,
Ricky, according to him, you're in Jerusalem right now. If
well,
you want to,
that's. I'd rather not be. I'd probably be getting bombed and shelled right now. But yeah, I think if you, it does sound like someone who's heard the hymn Jerusalem too many times and decided it was, and that could be the truth behind it. It could
I don't know
literally.
whether, yeah, I don't know whether you could consider Beaumont to be a British Israelite or not. I think that's the name of the movement, the British Israelite movement. That was prominent for a while. I don't know whether you could really say he was. I've always been
Maybe
curious as to what
no,
the Jews actually think of these ideas and these theories. I can't imagine they would particularly warm up to it, but Beaumont taking all their sacred sites and saying, "Oh, by the way, they're all in Britain and Northern Europe." I think they'd be like, "What?" That probably the reaction would be more confusion than anything else. Like,
yeah,
this guy's nuts.
but I mean, but then go back to again, only because I've worked on Hannibal,
Yeah,
and you will find, at the extreme ends of history, there are people who will tell you that the whole Hannibalic story happened in Ireland.
yeah,
Um,
Beaumont.
now that's completely big, but then um, closer to home, you find that there is that now the Lusitanian legend, the concept that Hannibal and everything around him was more to do with Portugal, and then you find the Afrocentric version of Hannibal, which is to recast Hannibal as a black man, which he wasn't. He was, he was Carthaginian, which was, I suppose, modern day Tunisian. He was described as being what you call olive skinned, etc. He was not black. He was not Irish. He was not Portuguese. I've looked into it. There is no Portugal have tried to sort of appropriate Hannibal's legend, but so have, it's very down in sort of, again, we talk about historical movements and be it Afrocentrism or what have you. It has been appropriated by sort of by African stroke black culture, by not by the Irish on saying that he is. Other people are saying he was Irish, but that's the very far out legend. Portugal, like I said, has this big Hannibal legend going on. Everyone wants a bit of Hannibal.
Yeah, they all want to claim him.
Yeah, and and much to the same point that Greece and Macedonia still have endless arguments. There are thousands of people online all arguing because Alexander was from Macedon, and Macedonians would say, so that means he's from Macedonia, and the Greeks are going, no, he was Greek, which Alexander was not Greek, and he was not Macedonian. He was a Macedon, and Macedon doesn't exist anymore. And they in the neighboring cities between sort of Greece and Macedonia, they build these statues, tall, great big statues at each other, trying to claim that Alexander was one or the other. And he was neither. That is the honest truth. He was neither. But again, it's appropriating legend, isn't it?
Well, guess what? According to our good friend Commons Beaumont, none of them have to worry about that. He was actually from Inverness.
Oh, good God. Oh, there you go.
Well, there you go. We've solved it. We've sorted it.
Hannibal or Alexander we're talking about here?
Alexander the Great. Apparently, it was Macedonia was the north of Scotland, and Macedonia was between Inverness and Perth.
So he was known to Sandy as his mates, obviously, as all good Scottish Alexanders are. Oh dear.
Yeah. I did a presentation with with another gentleman who's hopefully watching this presentation at some point. But let's get back to the wars of Damascus. So when we consider the wars in which Damascus was involved with her neighbors, they point to its geographical situation. King David defeated the Damascenes near the Euphrates, where Hadadezer, I'm guessing, later went to recover his lands from David. 2 Samuel 8:3. That is a region abutting on the North Sea, because of course it is. Again, in the time of Jehu, king of Israel, Hazael, king of Syria at Damascus, captured Ramoth Gilead, 2 Kings 9:14-15. Ramoth Gilead, or Ramah, adjoined Avebury and Hebron, Barbary Castle.
I mean, that's just baffling, isn't it? It's just baffling. It's just sort of he's going for. It's like he's trying to cram so many words in. He's forgotten how to construct a sentence at this point. It's he's not giving me very much. And he's saying, well, okay, the wars in which Damascus was involved with their neighbors. Okay, fair point. Transpose that onto this. Where are these wars? Where's evidence of these wars in where you say it is? And he's going, so that was there, so that's here. How? Where? I don't see the join, And again, I mean, look, he's
Oh, hang on, you're frozen.
Okay, so on this one, he's massively Bible quoting, but then in others, he's going into, again, Atlantis and the weird and wonderful, and ignoring the Bible as a source, as a history source, or what have you. But now it's all Bible. So he's taken a bit from there and a bit from there and a bit from there. There's no consistency to what he's saying. He's grasping at his sources. You know, he's quoting. I think he's got what? How many? He's got at least 2 Bible references in here.
Samuel and Kings.
But he also doesn't say why. You know, there's like the Wikipedia wallopers who are like, you know, come up with a vague reference somewhere, you know, and there's always the link, the broken link that doesn't exist, so you'll never know anyway. Yeah.
Like I say, he certainly knew his Bible history. That is for damn sure.
Oh, we did. I mean, you know, the Bible is a history book. In fact, if you look at military commanders, I mean, you know, Stonewall Jackson considered the Bible not just a history book, but a military history book. He said, if you want to learn strategy and tactics, look in the Bible. Everything's there.
Oh yeah, especially in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I don't think you get a lot of value out of the New Testament, but you know,
it's a hard read, isn't it? I mean, unfortunately, I grew up with a church school, and it was a tough sell. It was a tough sell, you know. I mean, you know, I preferred the Old Testament where everyone was killing everyone for no logical reason. It just sounded a damn sight more fun. But you know, schools are more New Testament and you know, water and the wine and stuff like that.
Do you remember? Sorry, do you remember the South Park episode where the boys all were scared into starting a church, and of course Cartman of all people was leading it? Do you remember that?
Well, but I've seen too many.
That was a great episode. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Burgers, Asperger's and anal probes. But yeah. All right. So, but hang on, we're on a new page here, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Were you going to make a point?
No, not particularly. I was just chatting. Okay.
Do you want to do this one, or will I do it? Because it's quite lengthy.
Oh, you better do this one.
Okay. So before the rise of Babylon, so King Hazael smote Israel in Gilead and Bashan, 2 Kings 10:32-3. And for some 60 years, Damascus still possessed them, for we find Amos prophesying that Baal would, quote, break the bar of Damascus and cut off the inhabitants from the plain of Avon or Avon, Amos 1:5, and who then ruled in Eden. Therefore, Damascus was predominant at that time as far as Somerset and also over Devon and Cornwall. For we learn that later its king made the Idumean king Aretas ruler over much of Col Syria. Josephus describes Aretas, king of Edom, as an Arabian, but Arabia is merely a translation of the Hebrew word Arab, meaning the West. By the way, I looked that up on Google Translate. That's not strictly speaking true. There was
I already guessed that.
there was no other Arabia in those days. Well, of course not. I mean, anything outside of Europe doesn't exist if you're calm as Beaumont. Anyway, if these problems were given the attention they merit in trying to resolve the history of the past and its relation to Britain, it would reveal that Damascus exercised political power over practically all the south of England, and before the rise of Babylon stretched as far north as the Humber. The Syrians and Egyptians were the two ruling communities in opposition and were frequently at grips in regard to their boundaries. Well, that is a loaded statement, isn't it? That Arabia means the West. It comes from a Hebrew word, Arab. When I typed that into Google Translate, I got absolutely nothing.
No.
So he knows something I don't know. Or
the plain of Aben or Avon. I mean, isn't that just because there's so many letters in the alphabet. Hey, yeah, it's again. I mean, going back to what we said earlier, if you take out sort of critical details and just throw in, look back 1,000, 2,000 years or what have you, you tell me the difference between, as I said earlier, Hitler, Napoleon, Vladimir Putin now, what have you. They all sound a bit like the same bloke, but they're not. and it you could easily say, well, that was there, that makes sense to me over here. Um, it ain't necessarily true, and it's, it's a tough one. Again, we find him sort of trying and grasping and assuring us that this means this. And as you say, you look it up and it turns out it isn't at all. A lot of it is very much like, here is a word that's a bit like this. And if it isn't, let's say, oh, it's a translation of this, which is a bit closer to that. Or a translation of this, which is a translation of that, which actually, if you spell it badly, um, and squint slightly, it looks a bit like that. Again, yeah, he sort of, don't get me wrong. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to just tell you he falls down on, let's say, archaeology or something like that, because actually his study of archaeology in other books and what have you was rather good. He read it, but he probably didn't tell you everything, and he's very much sort of pointing at the bits he likes, like a whole page talking about basically there was a chalky hill, so it was Somerset. Was it?
Yep.
What else was there? But
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I just went into Google Translate. Hang on,
no,
I'll put it up on the wait, how do you put it on again? The screen share. Google Translate, yeah. So this is what comes up. Apparently, Arab means barge.
right, barge. Okay.
So has sod all to do with the West or whatever he was saying there.
Yeah, but you see, if he was here, he'd go, yes, you see, because they use barges there, you see. So then apparently there's a reference to someone using a barge somewhere, so it's there. Um, but again, I mean, this is sometimes that humans don't change a lot. It's one of the things you find. So,
Yeah.
I find that in things in in the modern world, in even very, very modern. I mean, you're well aware, of course. There's people who make conspiracy theories about me. I've been sort of um, followed by a stalker for quite a few years who filled the internet with lots of weird things about me, and this is entirely similar. Oh, that's so therefore that. Don't question it. Don't worry. We'll just carry on. Blind you with lots of words, and here's a pretty picture. And you'd be amazed how many these people fool with this kind of stuff, that you go along and you just sort of assume, okay, well, we'll get to the next bit, and you just sort of, I don't know, you surreptitiously sort of just accidentally pick up this thing and assume it's true. People don't change a
Yeah.
lot
No.
when they want
Yeah.
people to be convinced of stuff.
I mean,
Um,
if you're going to make the point that Beaumont was a bit more like a cult leader than a historian, you'd have a point. You
Yes,
know.
but he had a cult of one. It was
Yeah.
him. He was trying to
Yeah.
convince himself. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the thing. If you find there's no cult of Beaumont or whatever, there's no followers. There's no the Church of the what have you. It just seemed to sort of come and go. I think he was just trying to convince himself.
Mm.
What amazed me was that anyone was publishing him at this time.
I think he was
Um,
self-published. I don't know. I haven't read his book, not his book, his biography in a long time. The Rebel on Fleet Street. I haven't read that in ages, but can't
yeah,
remember.
it seems to me this is the man who was absolutely trying to convince himself. I don't think he
Mm.
was trying to convince other people. It doesn't seem like he had any kind of traction at all, but that didn't stop him from writing what he believed and stroke wanted to be true. But I don't think he
Yeah.
was writing for anyone else other than himself. That's
Yeah.
that's that's what I'm getting from his writing, But hey, what do I know?
Mm.
Philistines. There you go. I'm one of those. Very good.
Apparently.
I can be sometimes. Um,
I'm being tongue in cheek. Do you want to do this, or will I do it?
yeah,
Sorry.
sure. I'll do it. Yeah. So
Okay.
Dorset, alone in the south, seems to have been independent. But that was Phoenicia, oh good God, well, with the great cities of Tyre and Sidon, with which Damascus carried on considerable commerce. In the records of Egypt, her eastern frontier was protected by Pelusium, originally Philistine Ashdod, which lay to the north of Hebron and Ramoth Gilead, as discovered by Dr. Lepsius, the painstaking German Egyptologist. He was constantly at a loss to discover any of these territories in the present Egypt. The area first occupied by Abraham, when he led his Hebrews south was in the eastern parts of Mizraim,
Mm-hmm.
the land of the Philistines, who were the Egyptians whom he subdued. So basically, the Egyptologist was wrong, so I'm right.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yeah,
And yet he describes him as the painstaking German Egyptologist. He was
I mean,
constantly at a loss to discover any of these territories. Well, yeah, no wonder, because it's the middle of the fucking desert.
well, not
It's
only
kind
that,
of
I mean,
hard to find these things.
it kind of says that every other Egyptologist was wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so all of this, great cities of Tyre. I mean, yes, Tyre did trade and commerce with Damascus because it was Tyre, because it was built by the Phoenicians, because they were a seafaring people, and this is well known, and then again, you see, Dorset was Phoenicia,
Mm-hmm.
is how he starts, but Phoenicia or Phoenicians, which were the original, uh, Phoenicians, of course, which became Carthaginians, is what I'm saying. Phoenician means traders in purple, which purple was the most expensive dye in the Greek world. In fact, it was more expensive by weight than silver, and came from a certain type of sort of crustacean-y, snaily creature, which grew around the rock of Tyre. That's where they lived, and that's where their ecosystem was. And so it was an obvious thing. That's how they became rich. Phoenician means trader in purple.
Hmm.
Can you say that this happens in Dorset? Much purple dye going on in Dorset, is there? Um, the reason he doesn't know is because he doesn't know. Um,
Write that one down.
you know, he doesn't know. Phoenician means trader in purple.
Yeah.
Um, and the only place that purple dye came from, like I say, was this certain type of sort of snail that grew around the rock of Tyre.
Mm-hmm.
And
Actual tire.
yes, yeah, hence Tyrians
Yeah.
became Phoenicians because they went out into the sea. They didn't have anywhere else to go. They were a Semitic people originally from what is now sort of Bahrain area, who were
Mm.
pushed through, chased through, much like gypsies were and Jews were, etc. They were pushed and they hit the sea and they built just have this little bit of Tyre, and then of course they became a seafaring people and they traded with the Greeks, who purple was a sign of opulence and wealth, and so they became known as Phoenicians, traders in purple.
Yeah.
So where does this land with? Well, yeah, it was Dorset, wasn't it, mate? That's
Mm.
of course it was Dorset. Dorset, famous for purple dye? No.
Well,
Um,
I have heard alternative theories about the origin of the term Phoenician. One that I heard that was quite extraordinary, especially for a Rangers fan, is that the term Phoenicia or Phoenician came from Fenian.
good God.
So when you got all the Rangers fans talking about, well, I don't want to say it, obviously, but
I can say it as negative. You dirty pinion bastard. Is how the song goes.
well, yeah, I mean, listen, mate, I've got nothing against Catholics. My friend I referenced earlier on who lived in Taiwan, lives in Korea. He's
Yeah.
Catholic. Means nothing to me. I got nothing against Irish people. I'm part Irish myself. Was it 17% or something like that? But but the idea that all the Rangers fan have been saying about I don't want to say it,
Yeah.
bastards, and it really is talking about the Phoenician bastards, and you're like, oh, wait, oh, hang on,
No.
you should think twice, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
those
very much
damn Phoenicians, fucking Phoenicians, right?
Phoenicians who happen to be historically become Carthaginians and blah 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 blah.
Well,
Hey,
if you're
let's
following Beaumont's train of thought, Carthage was really Waterford in the south of Ireland.
of course it was. Yes, I mean, why would it not be? Because Carthage exists and can be
Yeah.
seen now as a wonderful civilization. You can have a look at ancient Carthage and you can see everything. Go, whoa, what amazing people they were. But hey, it was Waterford in Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still, we're talking
Mhm.
about Philistines, of course. I still consider myself a bit of a Philistine for
Mm.
kicking apart a bit of fossilized elephant dung on the banks of the River Tagus in Spain and going, yep, that's definitely fossilized elephant dung from about 2,000 years ago. And this is pretty much
Mm.
where Hannibal crossed over. But no, I should have been in Ireland instead, shouldn't I?
Apart
So,
from yeah, apart from the Irish Fenian connection, which comes from Finn, from what was it? The Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland.
yeah,
Finn McCool. The name,
right.
apparently, the term Fenians comes from Finn McCool, who
I,
was the great giant, the big red-headed giant. There's also the theory that Phoenician actually meant the red men, as in they had red skin because when they went to the Mediterranean, they burned in the sun, and because they wore bronze and brass, and they traded in metals. So the red men meant white people who went to the Middle East and the Mediterranean and got sunburnt. Basically, I've heard that theory as well.
wow.
And you should read what David Icke says about the Phoenicians. He says they were related, I believe, to the Goths, which means the Scandinavians. They were actually from the north. They were the same race as the Gothic peoples and all this sort of thing. So Ike and Beaumont seem to be fairly similar with some of this. Not all of it, but some of it up to a point. The idea that the Phoenicians were actually the Irish and the Scots, and that they were referred to as the Bronze or the Red Men because they basically got sunburned when they traded in the Middle East.
Not very
And
good
of
at
course,
history,
Irish
I
and the well, of course, Irish people are going to turn very red in the sun because they're very pale. Some of them, not all of them, mind you, but some of them, and they've got red. Another reason why they're called the red men with red hair, the men with red skin, because they burned in the sun and because they had red hair.
yeah, I mean it's loose, isn't it? Um, I mean, yeah, it it's an interesting theory. I don't know as it gets to
Yeah.
be a theory, but it's an interesting hypothesis at least. But
And they're also famous for having green or fiercely blue eyes as
right,
well, red hair and green eyes or blue eyes. And they were quite tall and muscular and strong, very robust. They were known for their stature and their physical prowess as well. Think Sheamus in WWE, and you're not far
right,
off
that
the mark.
yes.
So there
So
you
like
go.
me without the red hair. No, not at all. Right, Forges of Avebury.
Yep. Mhm.
I'm reading this. Go on, you read it out
Okay.
because I'm gonna.
Okay. So it explains why Manetho, the Egyptian historian, in describing the invasion of the Cattlemen, or the Hyksos, he terms them, when Abram erected his fortress of Hebron in the Egyptian tongue, Abaris or Avaris, now Avebury, says that the invader selected a strategic post whence he could dominate the Egyptians on the one side and hold back Syria in check on the other, for Hebron was near the Syrian border, as all this region was originally under the appellation of Gilead, the chalk country, as is Wiltshire, the region concerned. In the time of Amos, as seen in his lament, Damascus had seized these very parts.
He's not giving us much. Again, it's sort of he's cramming in words, but not saying a lot. If I was sort of reviewing another historian's work or something like that, I'd sit and go, "Where you going with this? This is again, and you warned me prior to, of course, that he has a very scattergun approach. It's like it explains why, does it? Why? I'm not going.
Well, I'd also say this. Believe me, I'm not going to ask you to do parts 2 and 3 if you don't want to, but there's actually 3 parts to this. This is only part 1. There's that part 2 and a part 3 after this as well. So,
Oh, seriously. But he's talking about the Egyptians, the Syrians, blah blah blah, which was in Wiltshire. And don't get me wrong, look, if someone who's watching this and goes, "Well, what's the point of this guy being on? It's just pouring cold water on it." It's gonna, I'm looking and going, "Well, where?" Like if someone said, "Because this was found here and that was there, and that literally there is this history here, which is an absolute timeline from there to there," and it says, and you go, "Okay, oh, fair point. There could be something there. It's worth looking at." But he's again, it's sort of is pure assertion, isn't it, on his part?
well, what I will say is that Avebury, and this is kind of the elephant in the room, Avebury does not look like a castle or a fortress. It looks
I
like
didn't
a stone
know
circle.
what Avebury is. I never heard of Avebury.
Well, you can see the image there on the bottom right. It's a stone circle, and you can see on the top right the sheep standing on the stone. The reference to the cattlemen, or the sheep herders and all this, and
and,
Abram,
and those
famously
stones
connected with the
probably
rams.
and those stones probably predate the period he's talking about as well.
Well, the thing is, when he's talking about Avebury being the fortress of Hebron, the thing about a fortress is that it's meant to look like a fortress.
Yeah.
It's
And
not meant to look like a stone circle. A stone circle and a fortress are two very different things. A stone
yeah,
circle would be a pretty useless fortress, one
yeah,
would think. And
and
there's no evidence, no archaeological evidence of a fortress at Avebury. It's a stone
no,
circle.
yeah, no, I'll accept that completely.
Yeah.
Again, he's sort of wishful thinking. Here's ancient stuff, so that's an ancient thing. Um, and this is quite rare for him because actually, like I said, a lot of his archaeological stuff was actually pretty hot. So
Mm.
this is a big swing and miss, even for him. Um, he was normally a lot more. He tried to be a lot more accurate than this, but this is a sort of sweeping assertion as if he sort of heard of something or read of something in a book. But again, maybe due to his health, age, what have you, eyesight. You said he had all these problems going on. He's kind of
Mm.
heard of this place, but hasn't actually bothered to look. Can't go there. Um,
Good night. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so it's kind of like it's almost like a throwaway. Like he's picked this one up and just hold it in there just to hope something stuck. Is what I'm getting from it.
Yeah. Also, have you ever heard of the author Ralph Ellis?
Can't bring him to mind.
I've got loads of his books over there, and he gets to talking about the Hyksos, and there's a whole theory and all this with the Middle East and all that. But I won't get into that here because it's very sidetracky. But yeah, this group who came down from the north in Egypt and conquered Egypt, according to Beaumont, basically the Scots came down from the Orkney Islands and conquered this part of England for about 300 years before they were kicked out. Before the native Welsh and Southern English rebelled against them and told them to fuck off, basically. And
So
that's what led to King David.
even though the Norwegians and Danes and what became Vikings, Goths, call them what you want, depending on when
Yeah,
you're looking about, actually
yeah.
owned them first.
Well, this is a compression, of course, and I'm just
Yeah.
running through it very quick. But yeah, that's Beaumont's version. Abram was a war leader from the north of Scotland. They went south to this part of England. They conquered it for about 3 centuries, and then the English and the Welsh kicked them out. And that's what led to King David's conquering Edinburgh as we know it today, which became Jerusalem. That's a very compressed version, but this is another one of Beaumont's ideas.
Okay.
So Abram and his people were in control of this part of kind of Wales and the south west of England for about 3 centuries. To
That's
cut a
kind of
long story
like
short.
all British history that we know, but you know, but
Yeah,
let's just run with that. Okay.
sure. The frontier city of Ashdod. Do you want this one, or will I do it? I'm not bothered either way.
I'll do it again. The mention of
Okay.
Cirencester as originally the frontier city of Ashdod, later Pelusium, through which Assyrians, Syrians, Babylonians in turn had to fight their way when invading Egypt, indicates its important strategic site, although it stood for more than that. The necessity for an invader to overthrow this fortress first is explained by the fact that it controlled the highways from the north to the south and east to the west, and when in ancient days, and much later, battles were fought mainly by warriors in chariots, the importance of such a fortress is evident. These highways indeed isolated the various peoples, almost as though they dwelt on islands and communicated with one another by channels. That could be anywhere. And again, we have another name for Cirencester.
Mm-hmm.
Ashdod, later Pelusium, later Cirencester. How many names does he want to bring up for these places?
There's another one as well, Sauron.
Oh, good God. So
Yeah.
rather than go, that evidence doesn't match that, so I might be wrong. He's going, that is that, is that, is that, and it's all the same place. There you go.
Mm.
Ye gods. He's doing well, isn't he? In his own mind.
The image on the top right is Roman Cirencester, and the image on the bottom right is the highways around about England.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd throw that in. This isn't the best presentation I've ever done, but I think it's all right. It's a little bit muddled.
I don't think Cirencester was ever really that important. There was a fortress there, yes. But you know, they used chariots. So what? You know, they did. Everyone did. You know, you will find chariots in the Battle of Megiddo from 1469 BC, which is the first recorded battle in history, through to when the Romans came here, through to many years after. So someone used chariots and roads, so therefore a fortress was important. Is when you break down all the, you know, the padding, is what he's saying, which was true everywhere. These highways indeed isolated the various peoples, almost as though they dwelt on islands and communicated with one another by channels. That's everywhere. Is it not everywhere?
Well, I think what he's getting at is something he said much earlier on about all the forests in Britain at the time.
Yeah.
And that they were all kind of cut off by these forests.
But, yeah, I mean, again, it's very wishful. It's very wishy-washy, isn't it? It's very woolly statements he's making. He's doing it in a very great prose he's doing, but it is sort of, you know, one of those sort of
doesn't
together well but stands on nothing kind of statement.
It doesn't really stand up to scrutiny, in other words.
It could be anything anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, it could be anything anywhere. It's like saying that these people walked on two legs, so therefore they were British. Or,
That's a bit of an overgeneralization.
Yeah, but you know.
Yeah.
I
think also he's making a subtle Egyptian connection there when he's saying that battles were fought by warriors and chariots. I think he's kind of hinting at that was also what happened in Egypt. But like you say, that really is not saying much of anything because that's everywhere.
It was like, yeah, I mean, it was largely everywhere. You know, you will, like I said, you'll find that at the Battle of Megiddo. You will find that at the Battle of Kadesh, the massive chariot battle, and then which was out that way, and then you will find it, like I said, when the Romans first came here to Britain, and long after as well. So saying that chariots meant that it was there because they were in Britain. Again, is this a case he doesn't know because he doesn't know? We had chariots. There you go. The Romans wrote about fighting chariots in Britain, so it must be here, mate. And it's like, well, you ever heard of these really ancient battles?
Yeah. Hang on, you've frozen again, unfortunately. I'll just wait for it to unfreeze. Oh no, it's okay. You're unfrozen.
Like, yeah, so I was saying, just because the Romans fought people in chariots here, had he ever heard of the earliest battles like Megiddo, like Kadesh,
Yeah.
where there were massive amounts of chariots involved? Maybe he didn't. Maybe we're going back to he didn't know because he didn't know.
Well, I don't think it's so much that. It's just that anything outside of Northern Europe, and specifically Britain, was invisible to him or irrelevant. Was either
Yeah,
invisible or didn't matter.
but that's the thing. He's almost ignoring it, or he's ignoring the bits he doesn't like.
Yeah. Is this what you call cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he's trying to convince himself of something, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. Ramoth Gilead and Ashdoth Pisgah. So the regions in between, consisting of great forests, thick woodlands, moors, or swamps, absolutely forbade wheeled traffic. Does not just contradict what you just said, but anyway. It may be claimed with confidence as the accumulation of evidence has completely proved that Avebury in North Wiltshire was the biblical Hebron and Ramoth Gilead. So also was Cirencester beyond, known early as Ashdoth Pisgah. Pisgah, meaning the stream, was the specific name given to a certain area beyond the chalk highlands of Gilead and explained by the Marlborough Downs, termed the mountains of Abarim in the Old Testament, when the Israelites had gathered together in the time of Moses, like a swarm of bees on the border of Moab, now the county of Berkshire.
Wow, he's gaining in confidence.
Yep.
It absolutely forbade, did it? He wasn't there. It may be claimed with confidence, according to him,
Mhm.
as the accumulation of evidence has completely proved, which it hasn't. So this is now, you know, you will see this again. People don't change. People are reasonably consistent. And when I read this in any, it doesn't even need to be a book these days, does it? It's a blog post, what have you. When or a Facebook post, for God's sake. I mean, when you read this, normally you're automatically smelling the BS, aren't you? Um, they're sort of romping towards the finish line, which is nowhere in sight, and hoping that you sort of believe that it's there. Um, the stream was a specific name given to an area beyond the chalk highlands of Gilead. It's a bleeding stream. Could be anything. The Marlborough Downs or the mountains of Abarim in the Old Testament. And
Sorry.
I know. I mean, like, he goes for prose. Like a swarm of bees in the order of Moab. He's trying a lot of distraction tactics here. But I mean, no, when you read someone, it can certainly be proved now beyond all doubt, with all evidence showing, the accumulation of evidence proves absolutely isn't the gun is bullshit. this I hate to say it. When I spoke earlier about the HMS Invincible conspiracy theorists, of course, I love to laugh at regularly. Um, this is the same language they use,
Mm.
and this is a guy in 1950 or something writing
50, 52, 53, I think. That's when
52,
I wrote this.
53, and it's the same language people are using in 2023 and 2024,
Mhm.
who are absolute mad tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, and it is literally word for word the same thing that we're saying. And I would consider them as fanatics trying to convince themselves and others, probably themselves first. He's certainly being a fanatic trying to convince himself and maybe others, but you know what? When you read this kind of language,
Mhm.
it's it's got several layers of tinfoil wrapped around it, hasn't it? It's
Do you know the thought that actually came to my head is that Commons Beaumont is kind of like the ultimate shit talking heel of
how do you want to?
of crypto historians.
Right. Okay. Go on.
Do you know what I mean? Because you and I are both fans of wrestling and WWE and all
Yes.
that sort of thing, especially the classical 80s and 90s era.
Yeah.
But you could almost imagine it, couldn't you? Beaumont is like the ultimate shit talking heel on the microphone,
It's
like a Ric
yeah.
Flair or Roddy Piper.
Yeah. I was gonna go with kind of like a flair personality or something like that, or as you say, or a Piper, or
Yeah.
someone who's there to rile up the audience and
Yeah.
greatest, the best, etc.
Did you ever see Ric Flair's speech when he inducted Roddy Piper into the Hall of Fame?
No, I
It
must have
remind,
missed that one.
it reminds me of this because he was talking about Piper. They went to Puerto Rico, I think, or somewhere like that, where there was no white people at all. And Piper, being Piper, he walked out with the American flag, and on the way out, he was slapping people. And he wiped his nose on the flag, and he caused a big riot. Like,
Right.
oh, I've got to draw money, Flair. I've got to draw money, and all this sort of thing. He was deliberately winding them up. Just kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah,
Like,
very much the
look it
same.
up. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the audience. Look up Ric Flair's speech when he inducted Roddy Piper into the Hall of Fame. It is fucking hilarious.
I'll,
But understand he's not racist. He was just a heel. He was just trying to wind people up.
yeah. I mean, this is very much the same thing. I'm talking the same language as you at least. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's this is the I don't want to. The only thing is, I don't want to call this statement going full potato because
Mhm.
I have a feeling there's more.
Yeah. Oh, this is only part one of three. There's two other parts after this. Like I said, I'm not going to ask you to do parts 2 and 3 if you don't want to do it, but there are two parts after this. This is only
Let's
part one.
well, let's
So,
get to the end of this one.
mm.
There's no one going to
Well,
watch it.
uh, just one thing I want to say though before we do go on is I do have to re-emphasize what I said before. There were two parts before this one. This was part 3. It was meant to summarize everything. But if you go into Britain, the Key to World History, and somewhat the relative prehistoric Britain, he does cover these topics in more detail and more extensively. It is better quality than what you're getting here. And he does, he does write in the same style, but it's gone down quite a lot in this book, in The Great Deception. So it's worth checking out. There's another YouTuber, his name is Jeff Skeptic Media. He covered Britain, the Key to World History years ago, which is why I've not covered it. I didn't cover it because somebody else has already done it. That's why I went straight to The Great Deception, book number 3. But, this is covered in Jed's videos as before years ago when he did it before me. But anyway. So this is the last slide, 21, the Marlborough Downs. It's just a map of the Marlborough Downs as a general area from the last slide.
So from Reading to Swindon to Newbury to Andover. Well, as long as you've got Basingstoke, I mean, ancient Basingstoke, Basingrad, as they call it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Basingrad, yeah, the hub of the ancient world. Um, yeah, it's I
I've
think
never been there.
if you look at this area, there's a sea of brown in Basingstoke. I think if you look at this sort of on modern Google Maps, it would just say nothing happened here. It's a sort of
Okay.
greyish. It's like a sort of grey beige color. But so this map that we're having a look at here, this was ancient what to him? Syria.
Let's see. Does he talk about the Marlborough Downs in this
Yeah,
last one? Yeah, explained by the Marlborough Downs, termed the Mountains of Abiram in the Old Testament.
utterly convincing, isn't it? I mean, I'm a fan. I mean, yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, it's It's sort of undulating country round there. It really is. I can't see any sort of great mountains or anything that he's claiming are there.
Mm.
And it's a big old swathe of land, but you won't really find any towering mountains or anything. It's just
Mm.
undulating countryside round there, and and obviously no one will want to invade Basingrad. But barring that, you've not got you've not got a lot that he's sort of convincing me with here. Um,
Yeah.
which is weird because maybe I mean some of the stuff that I've seen from him, just having heard his name and been invited on here, was very intelligent and well-rounded stuff. And I appreciate you said obviously why you've covered his summary book, his Great Deception book.
Hmm.
Um, is he grasping at straws here? Is he just
Yeah, he
you
is.
know does he just
Yeah.
need the cash, or does he think his wife needs the cash or something after he's gone? Um, how did you feel about his evidence sort of summaries and presentations in the previous books? Better,
Oh yeah, much better.
much better,
Yeah,
more
but
relevant.
like I said, there was another YouTuber who did it before me, so that's why I didn't really feel the need to do it
Yeah,
again, kind of thing,
and you've
because
you've
somebody
had
else
him.
already did it. Oh yeah, yeah. Jeff Skeptic Media is his name. He did it excellently, by the way. I've said for years, even during the years where I was feuding with him and didn't get on with him, I still said that it was one of the best things on YouTube I'd ever seen. I
Yeah,
always give people their credit, regardless of whether I like them or not. Thankfully, him and I do get on these days, but it wasn't always the case. You know.
yeah, yeah. We've all got people like that, but I mean, yeah. All I can say, I mean, one of the fun things is the looking at Coleman's Beaumont. Um, like I said, it is still crypto history. His third book maybe goes into more what you call pseudo history. He's trying a bit too hard here, but it is fascinating. And I think one of the important things is not to go, oh well, so basically two guys were talking about a guy was talking a lot of crap. No, not entirely, because the guy, all history is history, and even the history of a person or the history of a theory or a belief system is still a history in itself. And as you've pointed out many times more than adequately, one theory, belief system, what have you, goes into another, goes into another, goes into another. It really does become, if you want to use the term rabbit hole, it
Mhm.
really does. It isn't that none of them are standalone. They all sort of they grow and grow and grow and they butt up to each other, don't they?
Mm.
No, they're interesting in themselves. And you know, I don't agree with him, but he does sound like a fascinating man. It would have been lovely to have had him on the show and go, "Where did you get that from?" And I
Yeah.
get the idea you wouldn't have been disappointed with the answer, even if you thought it was hilariously bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. There is one series of I'm working on a whole series of presentations at the moment because I've got the time on my hands these days without going into specifics, but I do have a little bit more time than I usually do in the present circumstances, and not much else to do with it. But there is one more I'd like you to do with me, and that is based on Britain, the Key to World History, the previous volume, and see if you see the difference there between that one and this one.
Yeah, totally. We'll do that because this was, as you say, this is the tail end of him.
Yeah.
You know, you'd rather see him in his better light when he's founding a theory than when he's sort of trying to swan song himself,
Yep.
so to speak.
And the name of that one, and you're going to love this, Rick, is Syrian, Antioch, and Lincoln.
Well, Lincoln, obviously. I mean, you know, it blatantly, you know, um,
Yeah.
yeah, Coleman's Beaumont is. Maybe I can see why he's not gained this popular traction, but jokes aside, at the man, Leicester, it's going to be a tough one, but yeah,
Lincoln.
I look forward to it.
No, not Leicester, Lincoln.
Lincoln, that would do as well.
Lincoln only has a population of about 20,000, I think. And yet he's saying it was Antioch in the old days. And he did have one factual inaccuracy that I caught him out on. He was saying that it was 750 miles between Antioch and the ruins of Babylon, but it was actually more like 620 miles.
Right. Sorry,
sorry.
You've not met my
Hello.
daughter. She was desperatally trying to come up and get on the camera. So
let's see if we can put you up here. Oh, I forgot how you do this. There we go.
Gent. This is her.
Hello.
She's
a little kitty.
She is a little kitty. She got me in trouble this morning through savaging next door's cat.
Oh no!
Didn't it, Jen? Jen?
Oh man!
And she's starting to go down now.
Yeah.
She's my latest rescue, anyway. Sorry, and it wasn't me trying to get her on camera. That was her deciding to come up and see what the noise was.
Yeah. Fair enough. The dogs are going mental.
Yeah, now one person's up, everyone's up. That'd be, the dog that didn't bark. I don't have that problem, of course. I have Mimi. We should do it all. And as you know, your viewers don't, of course. We rescue a lot of dogs there. So, that's Mimi. Ginty at least is quiet.
Well, I'll get in touch with you soon about doing Syrian Antioch and Lincoln and see what you think of that, given it was the previous volume, see if there's a big difference or no difference or what you think of that.
Beautiful.
Thanks very much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed it. I've enjoyed having you as a guest. You've been wonderful.
Thank you. It's been an absolute privilege. Thank you very much, mate.
It's a pleasure, mate. So I'll send this to you tomorrow and you can look through it and well, anyway, we'll just leave it there because it's been 3 hours and I'm sure you're probably as knackered as I am.
Yeah, I need another one of them.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Be lucky, mate. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Cheers, buddy. Cheers.